What is going on, everybody? Lag and Leonard here, back with another review, and we're back, guys. It took me a while to get my PC, it took me a while to get my mic, but we're finally back, and what better way to kick off the new year than to talk about Puss in Boots 2, The Last Wish. In my opinion, I think this is the best movie of 2022. This, by far, is definitely one of the best DreamWorks movies that we've ever gotten, one of the best animated movies that we've ever gotten, and definitely the best animated and best film, overall film, of 2022. Oh my gosh, is this movie amazing. I'm afraid I'm going to be here for like 40 minutes just gushing about it, talking about how amazing it is. Everything about it is awesome. It's honestly... It's been so long since it feels like it's been so long since we've had a Spiderverse movie. Like, you know what I mean? A movie that is near perfect. A near perfect movie. I really can't think of anything that's wrong with this movie. Honestly, I honestly cannot think of anything that's wrong with this movie. If you guys are looking for something to watch and you want to watch this in theaters, if you were thinking, hey, maybe I'll go check out Puss in Boots 2, go watch Puss in Boots 2. Oh my gosh, is it amazing. Everything about it is near perfect. The only thing I would say that is not perfect is its humor. I feel like Shrek had a better... I feel like Shrek just in general had better humor, but everything else, Puss in Boots takes the cake. Everything else. Puss in Boots' animation is obviously... This movie's animation is inspired by... It's inspired by Spiderverse. It is... awesome. I love that every single time the frames drop, you just knew something awesome was about to happen. I feel like this movie might be like Spider-Verse, where every single frame of it has something to offer, but we just need to wait until it's out on DVD and on streaming for all of us to just look closer into it. You know what I mean? So, again, if you are thinking, hey, maybe I'll check out Puss in Boots 2, or maybe I kind of am interested in Puss in Boots 2, go watch it. And another thing, you do not have to watch Puss in Boots 1 or the Puss in Boots cartoon or any of the Shrek movies to understand this movie, to watch this movie and appreciate it. You can watch those things and maybe it would make the viewing a little bit better because you'd understand a little bit more about this character. But this movie does such a good job at telling you about these characters and giving you such a very quick explanation and introduction as to who these characters are, to where you don't have to watch any of the other movies or any of the other things. The only thing from the first movie that returns in this one is Kitty Softpaws, Puss's love interest, and also one of his companions. That is really the only thing from the first movie that returns. And even then, if you did not see the first one, this movie does such a good job at explaining who that character is in a very short amount of time, while also being able to continue the story. Again, if you're thinking, oh, but I need to watch Shrek movies and Puss in Boots movies, no, just go watch this movie. You can go ahead and watch this movie without watching anything else Puss in Boots related. So, without further ado, let's talk about the actual movie, because I feel like we've already spent 3.5 minutes on an introduction because of how good it is. Oh my gosh, where do we even start? First of all, let's just talk about the idea for this movie. The idea for this movie is perfect. Puss in Boots, we all know Puss in Boots. Even if you're not a big Puss in Boots fan, you can pretty much make out that he's a little bit of a Sonic the Hedgehog. He's egotistical, but very powerful. He has this kind of legend going around about him, and he embraced that legend, and that's kind of his entire lifestyle. And this movie, it feels like the story is the perfect place to take Puss in Boots' arc, to take his story. It feels perfect. The idea of him being on his last life, he's already ran out of his 9 lives and he has 1 more left. That is such a good idea for a movie. I cannot express how good of a place that is to take Puss in Boots' story. And the way that they execute it is amazing. Perfect in my opinion. Again, such a perfect idea for this character and for this story. A perfect place for it to go. So the other thing I want to talk about really quickly, I could just talk about this movie all day if I wanted to. Death. Death is honestly one of my favorite DreamWorks villains. Death is so well executed in this movie. Usually if you think about a character like a Grim Reaper character or Death itself in a movie, something along those lines, you'd usually think of a character that goes like, I am Death. Something kind of really dark, or
I am death.
Something kind of dark, right? This one is way more calm. Everything about this character is so good. He is an amazing villain. I swear Disney's been lacking on their villains for the past couple decades. This is an amazing villain. DreamWorks has not stopped with their amazing villains. Everything about him is amazing. His motive is amazing because he's just the Grim Reaper. But the way, you have to watch this movie to understand it a little more. But oh my gosh, I love the way that he thinks about Puss in Boots and the way that he perceives Puss in Boots. Because he's like, oh, I want to kill this legend. I want to kill the infamous Puss in Boots. You know? And I love the idea. He's like, there was one scene, he goes, you know, the idea of 9 lives is absurd to me. That he really, stuff like that just adds so much more to the dynamic. And I love his design, everything about him, the way that he's presented, his weapons, the scenes that he's in, everything about him, his whistle, they are so menacing. They're menacing, and the way that he talks, I love it. I mentioned earlier, it's not a deep or evil voice. It's a very calm voice. The way that he talks, it's a little unsettling as to how calm he is, because he acts like a character that is overpowered, because he is a character that's overpowered. He's not crazy with that power either, you know what I mean? I love everything about him. He's so menacing. He is so menacing. Such an amazing villain. Probably one of my new favorites. I think I still have some other favorites, like you still got Ramses and you still got the Fairy Godmother from Shrek, but this right here is definitely one of the greats. I love this villain so much. I want to do a whole video just talking about how good he is. Everything about him is amazing. So I'm already 7 minutes in and I haven't even talked about the rest of the movie. Oh my gosh, there's so much to talk about. So one thing about this movie that is really, really good is the fact that there's a lot of characters in this movie that you'd think would get annoying. There's this little sidekick of Puss that he gets a name, and it's Perrito, if I'm not wrong. This little dog, you'd think that it would get annoying. This little dog would get annoying, and thank God he's not, because these writers and these directors were so good that they introduce a lot of characters that really could have been annoying if they were not handled well, but they are handled so well that they become likable characters. There's two, I guess, characters you could say. It's kind of hard to say in particular. One is Perrito, because he's this little dog who talks a lot, and you'd think, oh my gosh, if they give him bad dialogue, bad jokes, or bad dialogue, bad jokes, or just overall bad voice, you'd think that this would be a character that can get super annoying. But they give him a good voice, they give him good lines to say, he's performed very well, and he becomes a likable character. His whole design is very cute. I love everything about this character. He's a very fun character. Then you have you have Goldilocks and her bears, and they have these British accents. And again, if they were not handled well, I think these could have become unlikable characters. But because they're handled well, because they have good voice actors playing them, good voices, good performances, and good designs, good dialogue to say, they are really likable characters. I like the Bear family in Goldie. They're good characters. They also have some depth that you'll get to see later in the movie. I love it. It's amazing. So this really just tells you how they could have screwed up so easily by giving these characters bad voices or bad lines to say, giving them too much screen time, but they give every character just enough screen time to where they're perfectly executed. And I love that. It just shows how good the filmmakers in this movie were. It shows how good the choices were as well. Everything about it is great. I love how in this movie, it kind of feels like an Indiana Jones adventure. You have this artifact or this item that everybody's looking for. And you have Puss in Boots, Kitty Softballs, and Burrito looking for it. You've got Death chasing down Puss in Boots. You've got Jack Horner, who we'll talk about in a sec. You've got Goldie and the Bears. You got all these characters that are looking for this treasure. And again, they give every single character just enough screen time to the point where I think it is amazing. And I feel like this movie is just incredible with everything. They do everything so perfectly and so flawlessly. And again, I like that it feels like an Indiana Jones adventure. I see Puss in Boots as a character who goes after bandits and villains, and he's like Robin Hood. But I also see him as maybe like a treasure hunter. I could definitely see Puss in Boots as this kind of guy who's like, okay, I'm running out of lives. Let me go after the wishing star. I could definitely see Puss in Boots as that character. And again, I feel like that works perfectly into the story. And let's talk about Jack Horner. I like Jack Horner a lot because Jack Horner does not have that bad of a backstory. You again with another character like Jack Horner, you could make him annoying if you have him with a bad voice or you have him with bad dialogue, bad lines. Maybe he's too much of a jerk, an unlikable jerk. You know, they do such a good job at handling him as well. He doesn't get as much screen time as some of the other characters, and I think he gets a little bit more screen time than Death, but he's still handled extremely well. I love this dude. He's like a jerk, but that's kind of all there is to his character. You don't need really that bad of a backstory. He has a pretty quick backstory. It's just, I'm not going to explain it here, but it's kind of funny as well. I love how he has this bag with all of these mystical artifacts from like fairy tales, kind of like something you'd see in Indiana Jones, maybe all these artifacts, you know, you'd have this character with all these, like, he uses unicorn horns as crossbow darts, you know, he has like Jiminy Cricket in his bag and he pulls them out and stuff. That stuff's funny, you know, he pulls out like the phoenix and he uses it as a flamethrower. That's funny as heck. I love it. I love Jack Horner. I love his design too, with like his little legs and his huge body. Like, he kind of reminds me of Kingpin. And again, I think like all of the characters in this movie, he's very well executed. He doesn't need that much of a backstory. He doesn't need to be a twist villain. He's just a jerk, and I love that. He's just pure evil. You know, this movie has a surprising body count. It has a surprising kill count. There are a lot of people that die in this movie. Not to mention, Puss also bleeds in this movie. Puss in Boots gets sliced by Death. And also, because you don't see animated blood a lot in movies, it adds so much more to this scene. Because you don't see it a lot, so when it does happen, it really feels impactful. It really does feel like it's important. And I love how DreamWorks is willing to put blood in their story and in their movie for storytelling purposes, while Disney's still over here like, oh, we can't show this, we can't show that. DreamWorks, since day one, like the Prince of Egypt, look at that, Prince of Egypt, whole Nile, blood, you know, and Puss in Boots, you know, I guess Prince of Egypt walked so Puss in Boots could run. Again, love this movie. They really do try to take some risks with that. They show a little bit of animated blood, not that much, but it's very meaningful to the story, and it's very meaningful in just animation in general, you know? Obviously, Puss in Boots 2 is inspired by Spiderverse, and maybe since it's inspired by Spiderverse, Puss in Boots 2 will inspire other movies to take that chance, to take some risks, you know? I love that. I really hope it does make a bigger impact. Maybe not bigger than Spider-Verse, but make an impact, you know? I really hope this does, because this could help other movies be able to show more violence, to be able to show more blood. Again, that's not something that every movie needs to have, but if you're allowed to do that, it can just allow for so much more in a story. This movie is a perfect example of that. I really want to talk real quick about the animation. I've basically talked about a lot of the things that I love, but let's talk about the animation. The animation is obviously inspired by Spider-Verse with its, I think it's called animating on ones, if I'm not wrong. That is awesome. Every single time the frames dropped in this movie, I knew that some good crap was about to happen. Some good stuff was about to show up. Every time, you could just tell that there was going to be a good action sequence. There was going to be a good scene coming up. The fight scenes in this are amazing. Again, anytime that you see that they're doing animation on ones, There was going to be some amazing animation coming up, amazing scenes. The animation and the style of this movie, I love the style of Spiderverse, and I hope that we get to see more of it in the future. The bad guys had a little bit of that style, but I think this movie really did push it a little bit more. I loved it. I love the style of Spider-Verse so much, and I love seeing it in a Puss in Boots movie. There's rumors of a Shrek 5 coming out. Hopefully it doesn't have that same animation, mostly because I feel like it could work with Puss in Boots and a lot of other movies, but I don't feel like it could work with a Shrek movie. I just feel like animation on ones just would not look right if it was Shrek. Again, animation phenomenal. I love it. I love it. It's stylized. It's not realistic. It's stylized, and I love that. Everything about this movie, you could tell the backgrounds, the animation, the amount of effort in again, I love that. They put effort into this movie. They put effort into the jokes. They put effort into the characters. They put effort into the story. They put effort into everything about this movie, and I love that. The music in this movie is pretty good. The cinematography in this movie is pretty good. I don't know if you'd really say cinematography, but the storyboard, like the way that everything is presented, the way that everything happens, it's all amazing. And I think that's basically everything that I have to say about this movie, not to mention everything when it came to the voice acting was amazing. Definitely go check this movie out if you can. This is just a phenomenal movie. I loved everything about it. Everything about this movie I loved. Again, I would say that this is the best movie of 2022. Best animated movie of 2022, and definitely one of my favorite animated movies of all time. I already loved Puss in Boots as a character, and this movie is just, it takes that character and it takes that story to another level. Everything about it is awesome. I know I'm saying awesome and amazing over and over again, but it's really just to try and get this message across of how good this movie is. I feel like if you want to watch something good, if you've been saying, oh, all these animated movies I've been seeing from Disney suck, go check out some DreamWorks movies. If you didn't like the first Puss in Boots movie, you're going to like this one. If you liked Spider-Verse, you're going to like this movie. If you're just looking for some animated movie to watch and you say, hey, should I go take my kid to go watch Strange World or should I watch Puss in Boots? Watch Puss in Boots. Strange World, Avatar, screw those movies. This is the movie that needs to make $1 billion. This is the movie that needs to make $1 billion. Again, one last thing. Go watch this movie. I loved it. I loved everything about this movie, and I want as many people to check it out as they can. I know I recommend a lot of people, and I know I talk a lot about, I recommend a lot of movies, but I know I talk a lot about, go watch this movie, I highly recommend it. I mean it this time. Go watch this movie. If you're saying, I should go watch Avatar 2, don't watch Avatar 2. Don't watch some weird blue monkeys. Go watch Puss in Boots kicking butt in amazing animation and a near masterpiece of a movie. I have no complaints with this movie at all. Other movies I have complaints. This one, zero complaints. Some things maybe could have been done better, but I still think they were done incredibly well. That's basically it out of me. Go watch this movie. Go watch this movie. What is going on, everybody? Lag and Legit here, back with another video, and today we're going to be talking about Jesus Revolution. Now, this is an interesting movie because a lot of Christian movies get a bad rep. Christian movies in general get a bad rep because it's hard to make a good movie, and it's even harder to make a good Christian movie. You see, it's hard to make a good movie with good filmography, good cinematography, good characters, all that stuff that a good movie requires, while also being able to tell a good Christian message or accurately portray Christianity and tell a Bible story accurately. It's hard to do those things while also trying to make a good movie. So this movie is actually a hit in my opinion. I feel like a lot of them swing and miss when it comes to making a good Christian movie. This one, in my opinion, swings and hits. I think this is a decent Christian film. I think this is a good Christian film. I'll explain that in a little bit. There are a few things that could have been done better, and I feel like this movie in general has a really weird foundation, or really weird the way that it flows is kind of weird, but we'll get to that later. What is the movie about? And I find this really interesting what the movie's about, because I actually never knew that this was a thing. So this actually introduced an entire like chapter of history to me in a way. So this movie takes place in the 70s. The hippie movement was going on. There was this love and peace trend, and a lot of people were looking in all the wrong places for comfort. They were looking for drugs and all this other bad stuff. And there, at the time, the church was a lot more, not strict, but it was a lot more fancier. You know, you had to be well dressed to go into a church, kind of thing. You needed to be of good class, I guess. It's kind of hard to explain, but basically, hippies were not exactly welcome in a church because of the way that they dressed or the way that they acted. But there is this hippie named Lonnie, and he meets a pastor, and he convinces the pastor. He tells the pastor, he's like, my people, the hippies, they need God's word more, like not more than anyone else, but they need the word very badly. And the pastor sees his point of view and decides, hey, let the hippies into the church because they actually need the word of God. They need the gospel. And the church owners are kind of they're telling the pastor, they're saying, hey, why are you doing this? We didn't tell you could do this. And the pastor's saying, he's like, these people need the word very badly. He's like, the hippies need the word very badly. And he's saying, by not allowing them to come in, we are failing, you know? He's saying, and I like this message too. It's saying that lost people need the word badly. So don't close the door on them when they're looking for the word or they want to come in to the church and get the word. Don't close the door on them. Leave it open. I like that message. I really do like that message. And again, and in the story, they kind of spread the word to more hippies, telling them, hey, you can come to church and we will accept you with open arms. You know, come on in. And they find, and I like this too, they find other ways to spread the gospel. They use comic strips, they use music, and a lot of other ways. And I like that, because think about it, Christian movies, Christian cartoons, there's other ways to spread the word of God. I like that. So again, I like some of the messages in this movie. And they spread the gospel to all these hippies, and it actually became this huge, and I think that's why it's called this, Jesus Revolution. It became a huge new movement in the 70s where a lot of hippies were giving their life to Christ, and a lot of hippies were being saved and baptized. That's amazing. That's amazing. And I actually never knew that. I actually never knew that this had happened in the 70s. So this actually was a really interesting movie to me. I did not know this happened. So this was actually a really interesting setup and a really interesting plot to me. So meanwhile, we have that plot going on, and on the other side, there's two plots. They run at the same time, but they work off of each other well. These plots, they flow at the same time, but I think they work well. So basically, you have a young Greg Laurie, who's a famous preacher. I think this is basically the story of how he became a Christian. He was a part of this movement, and he was a part of the movement with hippies, and he eventually found Christ through the way that I just talked about. And I'm not gonna lie, the moment that I saw, not really Greg Laurie's character, but when I saw the direction that his character was going in, I kind of could predict what was going to happen. I could predict what was going to happen with this character. If y'all watch the movie, you could probably predict what's going to happen with this character. Spoilers, I guess. He finds out that drugs and a lot of this other stuff the movement had, the original movement, the hippie movement had, was not good. He finds out that drugs is not good. He really finds out firsthand how that's bad for him. And I like that too. And so eventually he gets invited to the church, and he becomes a big member of the church. He becomes a very big member of it, you know, he helps out a lot. And again, I knew the moment I saw where it was going when he started doing drugs and stuff, I knew that he was going to become a Christian right after, because I knew what happened in real life, sort of. I already knew who Greg Laurie was. And basically, that's where his character goes, and I knew that was going to happen. But what's interesting is I didn't really know what was going to happen after that. So again, let me just talk about this because it's a little hard to explain. Or I was going to explain this earlier, right? This movie is like it has a weird foundation. The movie's like pacing is a little weird. Again, its foundation is weird. It's kind of like broken up into two parts, right? There's the first part about the hippie movement and how it became this huge like Christian movement, you know? And I love that. And I actually thought that was super engaging. I thought that was super engaging. I love the story of that first part. And then it almost kind of ends. That first part sort of ends with Greg Laurie being baptized and giving his life to Christ, right? Again, I thought the first part was actually really, really good. Then the second part is almost like an aftermath. It feels more like an aftermath. Okay, what happens? What happens after Greg Laurie got baptized and gave his life to Christ? And the second half, I don't think I like the second half as much, but I still think it's a decent way to continue the story. In a way, it felt like the story was going to end with Greg Laurie being baptized, but again, there was an aftermath to that ending, and we get to see what happens afterwards. Again, it has a weird pacing and a weird foundation, but I like it. It's again, it could have ended with Greg Laurie just being baptized and getting saved, but after it actually has like an aftermath, which is good. I like that. And I like how, again, I was able to predict what was going to happen in the first part with Greg Laurie getting saved and baptized, but I was not able to predict the second half a lot. I was not able to predict it 100%. I was able to a little bit here and there, but not as much as the first, you know. I thought the second half actually had me kind of wondering, hey, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? So I'll give it that. That was actually really good. So overall, I think this is a decent Christian movie. I think this is a good Christian movie. The story is really, really interesting in my opinion. The characters are cool as well. I like a lot of the characters in this movie. I like a lot of them. They're well acted. Most of the cast in this is most of the characters are well performed, well acted. Um, I do think there were one or two times in this where I'm like, I would have added a little bit more to that scene. I would have taken away a little bit more to that scene, where I would have made some slight changes, but nothing major. Again, I feel like this movie does have a weird structure. That's the word I was looking for. Structure. It has a weird structure, but I think it still works out in the end. If it's more like an aftermath, that second half, but it is a weird structure, but I think it works. Again, there were some things I would have changed here and there, which, I mean, I'm not going to talk about them here, but I would have changed one or two things here and there. But overall, a decent Christian movie, a good Christian movie. Uh, I thought a lot of the things in this movie were really cool. I like the message of this movie. I like the way that it's acted. I like the way, the story. I like the characters. Overall, decent Christian movie. I think this is a really good Christian movie. I would definitely recommend this to anybody if they're looking for a good Christian movie to watch. I think this is definitely one of the better ones. What did you all think of this movie? Did y'all like this movie? Did you enjoy it? Have you even seen it? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to know. Creed is the first Rocky movie in the Rocky franchise to not have Rocky in it. Let's talk about it. So, this is actually an interesting movie because this is the first Rocky movie to not have Stallone or Rocky in it. And it's weird because I actually think this movie works without Rocky or Stallone. I know that's controversial. I know that it's going to upset a lot of people, but I think that this movie works without Rocky. It could have been a lot better with Rocky, but it works without him. So let's talk about why. Let's just really, really quickly. Let's talk about why Rocky and Stallone are not in this movie. So, Stallone's actually having a lot of problems with the people that own Rocky. A lot of people are wondering, well, doesn't Stallone have the rights to Rocky? Supposedly, back in 1985, when like Rocky 4 came out, he sold the rights to MGM Studios. So he has not had the rights to Rocky in a long time. If that's true, he hasn't had the rights to Rocky in a long time. And So he's having a lot of problems with the people that have the rights to Rocky and own the rights to Rocky. He seems to hate the people that own the rights to Rocky. He doesn't hate Michael B. Jordan. He doesn't hate some of the people, the other people that worked on Creed 3. He just hates some of the people that work on, that not worked on it, but worked on Creed 3. It's some of the specific people that worked on Creed 3 and own the rights to Rocky. He hates those people and will never work with them. And he even said, he's like, if Michael B. Jordan wants like to make another movie, he wants to make a Creed 4, and those people are not involved in it, he said, I will go ahead and I'll join Michael B. Jordan for another movie. He said, but it cannot have those people involved in it, if that makes sense. And another reason is that I don't think this was really a Rocky movie. I do hope they kind of George Lucas it. I don't like what George Lucas did to Star Wars, but I think they could definitely George Lucas this movie to fix it up a little bit. If Stallone makes up, and you know what I mean, if Stallone and the other guys get on better terms and all that, then I think that this would be good if they could George Lucas the movie. What I mean by that is adding more scenes, like later on after the movie comes out, like add some extra scenes here and there to kind of add Stallone into the movie. I think that can work. So this movie is really more of a Creed movie. Like, there's this new villain, and there's a lot of dive into Adonis. There's a lot of focus on Adonis, his family, Adonis, and his backstory, his like past. And I honestly don't think like Rocky really fits into that much. He like if you did a movie about Drago, Rocky, not Rocky 2, like Creed 2. Like Creed 2 had Victor Drago and Ivan Drago. You could not do a movie like that without Sylvester Stallone and Rocky. But this is a movie that doesn't have those characters, or it does have one of those characters. It does have Victor, but there's not a major focus on them. So, like, I think you should definitely, like, because it is more of a Creed movie, I feel like you don't fully need Rocky in it. But if it was a movie that had to do with Clubber Lang, or if it had to do, yeah, Clubber Lang's not in this movie. If it had to do with Clubber Lang or Ivan Drago, then I feel like you need to have Rocky. But because this movie has to do with Creed's story, this really is Creed's story. It doesn't have to have Rocky in it. Another thing is, like, I told my dad this. I said, you cannot pass the torch to somebody. The whole, like, first two Creed movies were about passing the torch to somebody else. You cannot pass the torch to somebody if you're still holding on to the torch. Do you understand? You can't do that. You need to come full circle. You need to give it to somebody else. You need to pass it on at some point. I think this movie, there's two places where I think they should have included Rocky. I'll try. I know we're already like 4 minutes in. Let me try to get through this, okay? There are two places where I think they could have included Rocky. The movie opens with a championship boxing match, and I think if they had included like Rocky just watching not the movie, but if he was watching the fight on a TV, or if he was like just outside the ring, something like that, it would have been fine. And the other part is like in the training montage or something like that. If Adonis had been like, if he called Rocky and he said, "Hey Rocky, like I this is my own battle, but I need some advice. What can I do? What are some, you know what I mean? Like, how do I beat this guy? I'm not asking you to come down to California to help me, but how do I beat this guy?" Something like that would have been cool as well. Also, the montage just didn't, like, it didn't go as hard as the other montages, if I'm being honest. It just was not as good as the other ones. Like, it had a lot of cool things in it, but, like, with the other ones, it was just so much better because they had the Rocky style, you know? You had, like, the champion of the world cheering you on, and here it didn't feel the same. All you need to do to fix that problem, though, all you need to do is later on add a scene of Stallone, like, with this family, watching the fight, like the final fight or something like that, watching it on a TV, and him rooting on Adonis, something like that. That's all you need to do to really fix that problem. But yeah, that's basically it when it comes to like Rocky and where they could have included him. Other than that, I don't think there were a lot of places to include him in this movie. So let's talk about the actual movie itself, because I mean we're already like 5 minutes in, we haven't even talked about the movie. So the movie is about Creed, of course, Adonis. Adonis wins the championship title. He becomes champion of the world, and he retires. And also keep in mind that Rocky, like after beating Apollo and like beating some other opponents, he wanted to retire. He did not want to go like on fighting that much. He wanted to end on a good note. So yeah, it's not out of the question for Creed to want to retire as well. So This takes place years after the after Rocky 2. Creed is now retired. He has his own boxing brand for like you know what I mean. He's got his own boxing equipment brand. Uh, he's got a kid now, which I think the kid is a really likable character. I like that she's a deaf character, and I think the actress is also deaf. But I like how she has a lot of personality. There's a lot of personality in that character that they get away with like visuals and stuff. I like that. And yeah, so Creed's doing just fine. He's a millionaire now. He's doing a lot, really, really good. He's got his own brand. His wife's making music. He's got a kid. Everything's going great for Creed right now. And so this person from his past shows up. His name is Damien. And if you remember, like in not Rocky, in Creed 1, Adonis had a really rocky childhood and a really rocky teenhood, if that makes sense. He was getting mixed up with the wrong kind of people. He had friends that were not really good friends, that kind of thing. He used to be like a gangster, if you know what I mean. And so basically, one of his friends named Damien from that era of his life returns. He's one of those kind of people, one of the people that you just don't want to be around anymore. He's not a good person to be around. And so in his past, Adonis actually was in some way the reason why Damien, which I haven't said this yet, but Damien got arrested in Adonis's past. Like Damien, he had gotten arrested and he got out of jail, and Adonis was sort of responsible for that. But Damien, he shows up at after 20 years or something. He shows up at Adonis's gym and he says, "Hey, Adonis, you remember me?" And Adonis does remember. And he feels obligated and he feels responsible to sort of like, he feels like he owes Damien to at least like give him some, you know what I mean? Give him some help, you know what I mean? Trying to get back on his feet kind of thing. Help him catch up with the world sort of thing. And basically Damien asks Adonis, he says, "Hey, like," because also I forgot to mention this as well. Damien was planning on being the best boxer. Like he wanted to be a boxer when he grew up. He and Adonis both wanted to be boxers, but Damien was like, he wanted to be it really badly. He wanted the title. He wanted to be champion. He had the eye of the tiger as a kid, but because he was locked up in prison, he never got his chance to actually fulfill that dream. And so Adonis feels like he owes it to Damien to help him out, to give him a chance. And Damien asks him, he says, "Hey man, like you, Rocky, this other guy that you're training, y'all are all getting that championship, you know what I mean? Y'all all got that once in a lifetime championship offer." He's like, "Can you do that for me?" So Adonis, again, feeling like he owes Damien, he gives Damien a shot at the title. Not fighting Adonis, but fighting somebody else. He gives him a shot at the title, and Damien wins. And eventually, though, Adonis kind of opens up a Pandora's box that was closed by bringing Damien and putting him under his wing, kind of thing. That ended up unleashing a monster, and so eventually Damien gets kind of crazy with power, and there's a lot of stuff that happens. Damien starts to do bad things, and because he has a level of power, and it's up to Adonis to put Damien back in his place and to stop him from continuing his rampage and stuff like that. And one thing I will say about this movie that I think is really good is the villain. Like, you can definitely tell that Adonis and Damien, also Jonathan Majors, good actor. I've never seen him in anything else, but good actor. You could definitely tell that this guy, like, he seems like the kind of guy who's been not traumatized by prison, but prison definitely changed him. Like, he could have grown up to be a much better person, but you know what I mean? He's kind of a broken person. And I like that you can definitely tell that they used to be friends when they were kids. The chemistry is there, like, you know what I mean? You could definitely tell that, like, hey, these two characters, they look like they've been friends they used to be friends for a long time, you know? And I like the development with Damien as well. I feel like a lot of, this one problem I don't really have, like, one problem that I do have with old Rocky villains is a lot of them were underdeveloped. The Creed villains are getting more and more development, which is cool. I like that. I like, I like just, like, I like Creed's family. I like a lot of these characters. I like Damien a lot. Really cool villain. And I love how he fights dirty. There's a spoiler warning, but there is a fight where he fights dirty. And it kind of got you scared because it was like, man, this guy, because he's from the prison, right? This guy can fight dirty and he knows how to get away with it. That was kind of scary. The only problem, one of the problems that I have with that though, is that like he fights dirty in a couple of fights, but like in the final fight with Creed, he never fights dirty. And I thought that that was like a really cool thing, like having him fight dirty. I thought, hey man, like that could be like, hey man, like Creed, like you get kind of worried for Creed. Like this guy's not, he's gonna fight dirty, but he actually doesn't fight dirty in the final fight. Maybe that's supposed to mean something, but I was kind of hoping he would. It would have made him a little different than the rest of the characters in the Rocky, the rest of the villains in the Rocky franchise. Like, Clubber Lang and Ivan Drago are deadly, but they're not gonna fight dirty. They have a sense of honor to them. Like, this guy will fight dirty, like, he gets away with elbow strikes, he gets away with a lot of other stuff. Like, I wish they would have done a little more of that in the finale. I do like a lot of the characters in this movie. I like Creed's daughter. I like his wife. Like, they're all likable characters. They're all really good characters. They're all like enjoyable characters too. So it's not like, oh, you don't have Stallone, you don't have all these other Rocky characters. You know what I mean? Like, nah, you're fine. This movie holds up on its own. It's hard to say if this is the best like Creed movie. I like all the Creed movies, but I'm not really sure. I would have to rewatch them all like back to back to figure out which one's the best. Because this one doesn't have Stallone in it, so is it? You know what I mean? It's kind of hard. You could point at Rocky 1 or 2, not Rocky, Creed 1 or 2 being the best. It's kind of hard. There is one other thing, like, I would recommend you guys check this out, by the way. I'm not trying to spoil too much. I think I did, though. So there is one more thing before we wrap up this video that I do really like about this movie was I like that Michael B. Jordan was inspired by anime for this movie. I love the way that this movie feels. Like the first, I think 5 Rocky movies were like exaggerated boxing. Like that, the first 5 Rocky movies were obviously not boxing, but they were exaggerated boxing. Then Rocky Balboa to like Creed 2 was like realistic boxing. This one is kind of back to exaggerated boxing, but more like fantasized boxing. There's a lot of slow motion shots and combos and I love the scene in the final battle. There's a scene in the final battle, but I feel like this is also like a double-edged sword. There's a scene in the final battle where like Damien and Creed, they're fighting and the entire audience goes silent and it's nothing but black. Like there's like just shadows there or something like that. There's nobody there, nobody there. Everything's dark except for the ring and the opponent. And I love it. There's no music playing. All you hear is all you hear is the punching and the dodging. You know what I mean? That's all you hear. I love that because it shows that there's nobody but the opponent and you. I love that. That's awesome. It's like there's only 2 guys in this thing. There's nobody else watching you. Just you 2 fighting. I loved that imagery. There's a lot of like cool not exaggerated, but like anime imagery, if that makes sense. But then again, I also didn't like it too much because I liked the part where they were like everything went silent and it just showed the 2 fighters fighting. I was not a fan when like Adonis gets knocked back into the ropes and then the ropes turn into like a prison cell. Like I guess that could work, but it feels a little weird seeing so much like CGI on the screen in a Rocky movie. It's weird. There's other stuff like that in the movie, but I do love that first effect where it's like it's just 2 people fighting, nothing else, just you 2 in the ring. I loved that. I'm not really sure if there's anything else I love about this movie. There is a lot of good things about this movie. I would have loved to see Rocky in this movie. I love the story too. This movie is not a repeat of Rocky 3 or Rocky 4. It's not a repeat. It is a new story, so don't expect it to be a repeat of any of the other movies. I don't think there's anything else I want to say about this movie. I love this movie. This is a really good follow-up to the Creed movies. Another good, solid. Also, when it comes to other legacy sequels, I think the Creed movies are actually really good. Like, they have stayed pretty good. Like, there hasn't been, like, that much of a dip in quality or anything like that. Like, with other stuff like Star Wars or, you know what I mean? Like with Star Wars or Terminator or any other, like, franchise nowadays that gets screwed up by Hollywood, this has been pretty good. They haven't gotten, like, messed up, you know what I mean? These movies have stayed faithful to the original franchise. They've honored the original franchise instead of ruining it. yeah, so these sequels are pretty good. Another solid entry in the Rocky franchise. So what did y'all think of this movie? Did y'all enjoy this movie? Did you like this movie? Make sure to let me know in the comments. I'd love to know. Did y'all like Creed 3? I'd love to know. I like this movie a lot. Definitely would recommend it if you like the rest of the Rocky movies. If you like the Creed movies, would definitely recommend this one. A lot of people might be thinking, well, it doesn't have Stallone, so it's gonna ruin the Rocky franchise. That's not true. It's a passing the torch movie, you know? You got to pass the torch. You cannot pass the torch and still hold on to it. You got to let it go. You know, and I feel like this movie is perfect at doing that. Overall, great film. I loved it. Overall, great film. Also, this was Michael Jordan's first movie, first directed movie, first his directorial debut. Great first movie, not gonna lie. But yeah, what did y'all think of this movie? I enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun with it. Solid entry in the Rocky series. So I just got back from watching Creed 3 and Cocaine Bear, and one of these movies was amazing. It definitely wasn't this one. So, Cocaine Bear, right? A lot of people had mixed opinions when they saw the trailer. A lot of people said, hey, maybe this can be funny because it has a sort of a dark humor edge to it. Some people said, hey, this could be like another Man vs. Beast movie, like Beast that we got last year with Idris Elba. Well, it's interesting to say the least. I remember I told my dad, I said, hey dad, I want to go watch Cocaine Bear, and he laughed at me. He said, Cocaine Bear, what the actual heck is an idea? Like, that's not even an idea for a movie, he told me. Like, that's so dumb. But it's based on a real story, and I thought that this was a really unique idea. Like, a really unique idea that I had never seen before. You know, if you saw my Beast review, you know that I love Man vs. Beast movies. I love the killer animal movies. And when I saw the trailer for this one, I was hoping that it was going to be like that, but it wasn't as good as it could have been. I feel like the idea for Cocaine Bear was a really cool idea that was just executed very poorly, in my opinion. So let's just talk about the movie. Basically, if you read the title of the movie and you saw the trailer, a bunch of cocaine gets lost in the woods, and a bear gets into it, and he eats it, he gets high, and he goes on a rampage. It's inspired by a true story, right? Now, again, it sounds ridiculous, but I think this could have been an amazing setup for an original and unique film. Think about that soon. Nowadays, Hollywood has to make sequels of movies. This is something original that we haven't seen before. Not to my knowledge. We have not seen this before. This could have been an amazing film. But it's executed so poorly that it's bad. Like, I don't know if it's so bad it's good. I don't know. When I saw the bear actually killing people, I was thinking, hey, I'm actually getting what I asked for. I got a bear killing people and it's high on cocaine. Cool. But the rest of the movie is just like these boring humans, and then it has this weird and goofy tone. Like, we'll talk about it in a sec, but yeah, let's just talk about that right now. Let's talk about the weird tone of this film. So it has a weird editing style. There's this thing where they'll cut back to flashbacks. It reminds me of the Munsters that I saw last year, which was kind of a bad movie, a really bad movie. And it reminds me of that movie, The Munsters. It has these weird, really weird editing. So basically, they'll be like, oh, well, do you remember that body that we saw earlier? And then they'll cut to a really quick 3 or 4 second flashback of that body. And then they'll cut right back to what they're doing. But it's you couldn't just show us the body and then you continued walking. You know, it feels really, really weird. It feels really weird. If I was filming that scene, what I would have done was I would have filmed them running into the body, seeing what the bear could have done, keep moving, and then you get to that part. Hey, remember what happened to the thing? We saw that. We would have seen it. We don't need a flashback for that. The editing in this is so weird, and they even throw these really weird sound effects over stuff, and a lot of the stuff in this movie feels goofy. A lot of the performances in this movie also feel really goofy and not even they're not even that funny in my opinion. I think dark humor, cruel humor could be funny in some cases. I remember there was this episode of SpongeBob that had cruel humor, but it was really, really funny the way that they did it. This movie tries to do some stuff, and I think at some points it could have been funny, but it's just not executed well. There's this scene right, where they open the door and there's this lady with a gun and she tries to shoot the bear because she thinks the bear's about to get into the place, right? They open the door. These two guys. They open the door and the bear's right in front of them. The lady ends up shooting at the bear, but she hits the guy in front of her that opened the door instead. And it could have been funny if they did it differently. But the way they did it was just not funny at all. It would have been funny if they saw the bear and the friend told the other guy, he said, "Hey, close the door, there's a bear." And then he closes the door and then the lady shoots. Like, that would have been a little funny, but it's just the way that things are done in this movie. It's just not at all funny. And I was also hoping for more, like, action in this movie. There's very little action in this movie. Like in Beast, which I'm gonna compare this movie to. Like in Beast, I remember like the lion and Idris Elba fighting, and you had like him with the gun, and you had him with the, you know what I mean. A lot of this stuff was really cool in Beast, but in Cocaine Bear, they don't even shoot the bear. Like, they shoot it one time and that's it. Like, what I was hoping for with this movie was, I was hoping it was gonna be a man versus beast film, you know, like a killer animal movie. I was hoping that they were gonna shoot at this animal and they were gonna kill this animal. Spoiler warning, but the bear never dies. The bear never dies in this film. Like, it actually makes it to the end of the film unharmed. And it's like, what? I heard that in the original, like, the actual story, like, the real life event, I heard that it died to an overdose. And I remember when I saw the trailer and I heard what happened to the actual cocaine bear, I said, you know what would be cool for like a final death of the bear? Have it like getting shot so many times on cocaine and it keeps going and it just keeps going because of how high it is. And then have it like charge towards somebody and it gets on top of them. It's about to kill them. And then it dies of the overdose. You know, that would have been really cool. But the bear makes it to the end and they only shoot the bear once. And I'm like, what? Like, you could have done something really cool there, but you don't. Like, you're not going to be setting up future sequels, man. Don't do that. Another problem is that the cocaine bear, look, every movie has its selling point, okay? Every movie has its selling point, you know? The thing that makes you want to go watch it. For me, this was the cocaine and the bear, like the actual cocaine bear. That was the selling point for me. Like in Jurassic Park, the selling point is the dinosaurs, but for this it was just not like, the bear was okay, but it wasn't like as good as it should have been. The cocaine in this is really just a reason to have the bear kill people. And like, I was hoping that like the bear was gonna get, because what does cocaine do? It makes you go crazy. It makes you unstoppable. It would have been cool to see this bear going ballistic, and it would have been an unstoppable force. You keep shooting it, you ram it with a car, you stab it, you slice it, you throw it off a cliff, you know, and it still keeps going because of how high it is, you know. And then at the end, after it ate like the whole supply, then it dies of the overdose because that's the only thing that could have killed it. You know, and think about it too. Like, a bear is a big animal. You know, like, it's a big animal. It's a sturdy animal. Like, it could take a lot of cocaine. This movie, like, they just use it as a reason to have the bear kill people. Like, that's literally it. You could have done so much with that. You could have had the bear going ballistic and you burn it and you hit it with a truck and it keeps going, you know? But they don't do that at all. That was the selling point for me, was the idea that this bear was ballistic, but it's kind of just a normal bear that goes around killing people. Like, it doesn't even feel like a high bear. It never really feels like a high bear. It just feels like a super powered bear, but not like a crazy bear, you know? And again, I mentioned that like the editing is really weird in this. It's really weird. Like, I think the way that they did this was really weird. And then you have, I think his name is Ray Liotta. This was his last role playing the villain in this movie. The villain in this movie is not even in it for that long. Like, I thought he was, honestly though, I thought he was the best part of this movie because he wasn't in the movie that long, but he was the only one in this movie that like really was serious about what he was doing. Like, he actually had a serious tone while everybody else was kind of goofy and dumb and acting dumb. I feel like this movie could have benefited from it. Like, if it wanted to do the dark comedy thing, like that it was trying to do, it could have made that work by just making the jokes funnier and having a little bit more funny cruel humor instead of it just being cruel humor that isn't funny. That, or it could have benefited from a more serious tone. If it was a little bit more like Beast, like, imagine just like, imagine this. Imagine like Like there's this mom in the movie, which is honestly, other than like the mom and her kids are like the only ones in this movie that I said, yeah, I want to see that person live to the end. That's it. Imagine there's this mom and her two kids, and they decide to go for a hike in the woods. Like the dad's off at work or something. Then they get attacked by the cocaine bear and they're stuck in the woods. And so like the father, the husband, he goes and he grabs all his hunter buddies and all of them go into the woods to go save him because they're all cool and like that. That would have been kind of cool. Imagine a whole squad of these hunters that go into the woods and they all get picked off one by the bear. You know, that would have been cool. The CGI in this is not really good either. I think the CGI in this, like, some of it looks really fakey while others look fine. It's really weird. Like, some of it looks fine, some of it is really, really fakey. And, like, there's this one scene where, like, and also some of the bear kill, like, when the bear's actually, like, when we get to see the bear doing things, like, there's this one scene where he grabs this lady's arm and he literally swings the woman and, like, throws her into another patch of grass. That was kind of cool the way it was done, but, like, that's really the only example of it. Like, that's it, man. Not to mention, like, the characters in this movie make a lot of stupid decisions, like, a lot of stupid decisions. And it's like, it's not even like other ones where you can understand it. This one's just really stupid. Like, there's this guy that tries to check the pulse of the bear to see if it's dead or not. Like, what do you do if you want to see if the bear's dead? You poke it with a stick. You don't go, like, putting your hands on the bear and expecting it to be dead or asleep. Like, for all they know, it was asleep. Like, dude, don't be that stupid, bro. Like, come on. Oh my gosh. And it gets me sad because, like, I thought this could have been really cool, but it's not. It's a bad film. Like, it could have been good in a lot of ways. It could have been good. It could have been better. It could have benefited from a dark tone or maybe better humor. It could have benefited from not a dark tone, a more serious tone. It could have benefited from better, like, I don't think the actors in this are bad, but I think like the actual characters in this are bad. They're all pretty boring, and if they're not boring, they're just bland. Like, I think everything in this is kind of mediocre. When the bear's actually killing people, I think it's actually good, but like when it's not killing people and you're just focusing on these humans that I don't care for, then it's bad. Honestly, this is a mediocre film in my opinion. If you really do love, like, okay, look, if you're like me and you like the Man vs. Beast movies, this is not a Man vs. Beast movie, okay? You're not gonna get the same experience you had with Beast. This is something else. Don't expect a Man vs. Beast movie. If you're looking for a dark comedy and like you're looking for something that you say, hey, I like dark comedy a lot, like maybe this is what I'm looking for, then maybe this is what you're looking for. But I did not laugh at any. I did not laugh at any of the jokes in this. I didn't like. There was not a lot of action. The characters were kind of bland. Like, I did not. It could have been so much better, but it wasn't. I never thought I would say this, but the Super Mario Bros. Movie might actually be the best video game movie that we've gotten so far. I know a 5-year-old me would have absolutely loved this movie. I think this is actually a great film. I know that sounds crazy because there was so much, not really controversy, but so many worries about this film when it was getting teased and when the trailers were releasing. There were so many people that were just worried that it was going to be bad because it honestly had a lot of signs like pointing towards it being bad. There were a lot of celebrities in the cast, which usually is a sign that the movie's going to be bad because that means that they're just trying to get celebrity names to boost the movie's popularity. And then it was made by Illumination, which, in case you guys don't know, Illumination is they're not really good at making movies. They're good at making animation, but not making movies. They have not made a good movie in like 10 years with Despicable Me 2, and then like this actually is probably one of the best Illumination movies too. Honestly, it feels so good to get something from Illumination that wasn't like bad. This was really, really fun to watch. I absolutely loved this movie. Now, I'm not gonna say that this movie is incredible. It's not like Spiderverse level, or it's not Puss in Boots: The Last Wish level good. But I'm not gonna lie, for it being a Mario movie, it's really hard to make a video game movie, and it's harder to make a Mario movie because there's so many things that'll be hard to adapt to the big screen. Knowing that it was a Mario movie and also being made by Illumination, and like just knowing that it's insane to me how good this came out. again, Illumination's not even that good at making movies, so for them to just release this and it's Mario, that was insane to me. Like, it was a pleasant surprise as to how good this was. A lot of Illumination's movies are like fart jokes or pop songs, whatever's popular nowadays. And there are some like popular songs in here, like they play I Need a Hero, they play Thunderstruck, but like it's not like Sing 2 or Minions Rise of Gru where they play a lot of popular songs and it gets like really annoying. Here they play some music that honestly fit the scenes that they were using it for, and then I wasn't annoyed by any of the songs that they used. Like, there was never any annoying songs in this, you know? Surprisingly, there were some songs in this, it's like, oh wait, that actually worked, you know? A lot of people were worried that Chris Pratt as Mario was gonna be bad, but honestly, like, this whole movie, a lot of the casting was like, oh no, that might be bad. No, I'm surprised. The entire cast was very well casted, and it took me a little while to get used to the Mario voice. Like, it took me maybe 20 minutes to get used to the Mario voice, but I liked the Mario voice. It really grew on me really fast. And I liked the chemistry between Mario and Luigi in this movie. You know, they're actually really fun to watch when they're on screen. It's a shame to me that they get separated in the movie. I really wanted to see more of them, but I mean, it's fine. I really liked this movie a lot. It's just, and I swear, I was just pointing at the screen so many times. You know that Leonardo DiCaprio meme where he's like pointing at the screen and he's like, whoa, whoa, you know, like that? That was me the entire time. I was constantly pointing at the screen going, oh my god, look at that. Oh my god, look at that. Oh my gosh, look at that, you know? I was constantly noticing references and a bunch of these Easter eggs, and I absolutely loved every one of them. There's one of my favorite ones was there's this pizza place, and it's literally a Punch-Out themed restaurant. That implies that Little Mac, after he retires in Punch-Out, that implies that he opens up a restaurant similar to how Rocky did after, like in Rocky Balboa. That's awesome to me. Like, I loved that. There were so many awesome references. A lot of characters from the games that show up. There were references to the cartoon. They also played a lot of cool music in this movie. Like, they used music from the games and they tweaked them up a little bit and like made slight changes to them for the new movie. It was awesome. Like, they use the DK rap at some point. They use Mario Kart music. They use Captain Toad music. They use, like, of course, Mario music. It's amazing. I love that they use like this classic music and they used it in all the right ways. Then like there's a reference to the Super Mario Bros. Super Show, which I loved that show growing up, and it's nice to see them reference it. Again, I feel like the fan service in here was insane. I loved it. Honestly, the fan service here was done so much better than the Sonic movies. Like, I liked the Sonic movies when they came out, but that was when we only had like one good video game movie, and that was like Detective Pikachu. Now we have this, and honestly, I know this is gonna sound like, because usually I don't like when people say, oh, the newest thing is always the best, because when people say Stranger Things Season 4 is the best, no, it's not the best. Like, a lot of people say that because it's brand new. This is one of those cases where I'll say it's the best, because I actually think it's the best. This is probably the best video game movie we've gotten so far. Like, the Sonic movies were good, but I don't think they perfectly adapted I don't think they perfectly adapted the source material. I think the Sonic movies should have been 3D animated films. This did such a good job at translating the Mario games into a movie. Like, honestly, the creativity of how they explain certain things, the universe that they created, the Mario characters themselves, I loved everything. They did such a good job adapting everything into a decent movie. I'm not gonna lie. Like, this movie, there's nothing really about this movie that I would say, oh, that was bad. Like, with Sing, the pop songs got annoying. With, like, Minions, the Minions were annoying. Here, like, there was nothing, like, I hated. I wish we would have gotten to see more of Luigi. I wanted to see, like, honestly, I felt like the ending was a little bit rushed, and I felt like maybe I wanted to see more of, Bowser and Mario fighting, but everything else in this movie was really well done. Like, it feels so refreshing to watch an Illumination movie that was actually good. I remember some of my friends were telling me, they're like, hey, but, Nintendo's gonna be breathing down Illumination's neck, so they can't, like, screw up this time. They can't mess up. Which is true, but I honestly thought that, like, Illumination and Nintendo I thought they were going to settle for an okay film. This is not an okay film. This is a pretty good film. I like it. Again, I'm not saying that this is on the same level as Spiderverse or Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, but man, I had so much fun watching this movie. I had a smile the entire time. Seeing these characters come to life on the big screen, that's something I've wanted to see since I was a little kid. And I remember people were saying that, like, oh, Chris Pratt was a bad decision. No, that worked out. Like, a lot of the casting in this worked out. A lot of things that people were worried about, don't worry about it no more. It's fine. Like, the animation's really good. The story's pretty cool. I like the way that they adapted everything. Like, it actually worked. It makes me so happy to say that this worked as a movie. Because I was telling myself, like, oh, I don't know. I was telling myself, like, I don't know, man, this might be bad. Again, my friends were telling me, like, oh, but Nintendo's breathing down Illumination's neck. Again, I thought they were gonna be, I thought this movie was gonna be okay, or I thought it was going to be mid. No, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. I'm so happy to be wrong about that. What I liked is that I actually, like, lowered my expectations. So when I went into this movie and I was watching it, like, I don't know, once I saw, like, the first 20 minutes, I was like, okay, I was wrong. This movie's gonna be good. Because it was good. Oh my gosh, guys. I got a huge smile on my face, too, right now, just talking about it. Because I swear the whole time, I was just like, man, guys, I was like, this is something else, you know? I loved it. I swear, like, I used to be such a big Mario fan, and seeing this on the big screen and seeing it work, it makes me so happy to see that this is a good film. Again, I had my doubts and everything, like a lot of other people, but man, I was just so happy to be proven wrong. Like, I'm so happy that this turned out to be a good film. Now, Rotten Tomatoes is saying that this movie's really bad. Like, I remember yesterday, as we were recording this video, I just got out of the movie theater. Do not ever trust what Rotten Tomatoes says. Like, a lot of the critics on YouTube are saying that it's good. Rotten Tomatoes said that this movie was terrible. Don't ever trust Rotten Tomatoes. Everybody was freaking out because they were like, no, Rotten Tomatoes is saying it's bad. Rotten Tomatoes saying it's bad, like the day before the movie came out. Don't ever trust Rotten Tomatoes. They are so bad at reviewing stuff. Like, don't ever trust them. This movie's, I would give this like a 70 or 80% on Rotten Tomatoes, but they gave it like a 50 or 40. Don't ever trust them. Don't ever trust them. I loved this movie. Again, I wish again, my nitpicks, right? My nitpicks are just that I wanted to see more of Bowser and Mario fighting. I'm sad that Donkey Kong did not say Banana Slamma. I wanted to see more of Luigi and Mario interacting. I wish that they wouldn't have made Peach so strong. I know that's a weird thing to say, but because they made Peach so independent and strong in this movie, if they introduce Daisy in the next movie, I don't think Daisy's really going to have an identity. But again, I had nitpicks here and there, but I loved this movie. Like, even Charles Martinet comes back to voice Mario's dad. Charles Martinet, the original voice of Mario, returns to play Mario's dad, and he also plays the original Jumpman. Like, you'll have to watch the movie to see, but oh my gosh, I swear, this movie was just a love letter to fans. I loved it. I think this is probably the best video game adaptation we've ever gotten. I loved it. Man, I swear, I had so much fun watching this movie. And usually when, like, one of these video game movies comes out, like, a lot of the people, like, the directors and producers, they always say that they were huge fans of the games and they try to make it, like, as faithful as possible. This is the only time where I 100% believed that. This is one of the only times where I 100% believe that the people making this were fans of the games. They actually put a lot of fan service in and a lot of references for fans. The Sonic movies did not really feel like that. I felt like a few people were fans, that people that were working on it were fans. Here, it feels like it was made by fans for fans, you know? Amazing. Again, I don't think this is Puss in Boots level movie. I think this is a good film, though. I don't think it's amazing. It could have been way better, but just knowing that it was an Illumination film, Illumination Mario movie that could have been a cash grab, knowing that it was this good, it's just amazing. You know what I mean? It really was amazing. I loved it. I had so much fun. But what did you guys think of this movie? I would highly recommend checking out the Mario Bros. Movie. If you're a fan of Mario, you're going to love this movie. I'm a huge fan of Mario. I know you're going to love this movie if you're a fan of Mario. If you're looking for something to just go watch, I think you'll enjoy this movie just fine. Trust me, anything that you're worried about, like, oh, I'm worried that Chris Pratt's gonna ruin the movie, I'm worried that Illumination's gonna ruin the movie, I'm worried that this, I'm worried about that. Don't worry. Trust me, everything will be fine. John Wick Chapter 4 is probably the best movie in the franchise. I honestly thought that this was a near perfect film. Everything in this movie is so well put together, and the movie takes all of the best elements from the other movies and crams all of those amazing elements into one movie. Honestly, I had some nitpicks here and there and one problem, but other than those nitpicks and one problem, I would say that this is a near perfect film. It is the perfect way to end the John Wick franchise, and I'm not sure if there's going to be future movies, but if they ended it here, I would be totally fine with that. This movie is incredible. The action is probably the best in the John Wick. Out of all the John Wick movies, this movie probably has the best action. There's a lot of new characters in this movie, but surprisingly, all of them are given nice development, and all of them are very likable or unlikable. There's a new villain in this movie, and you'd think, oh, this new villain just got introduced, he might not have enough time to develop because there's so many characters. No, he gets some nice development too, and he becomes an unlikable villain. The perfect level of unlikability. And there's so many things in this film that are just so well done. There's a lot of amazing action. There's this scene, and honestly, it was insane. I remember having so much fun watching it. There's this scene in the movie where there's a bunch of assassins chasing John Wick, and they have dragon breath shotguns, which basically they shoot out like sparks and fire. And they filmed it where it's like a bunch of rooms and it has no ceiling, so it looks almost like a video game. Honestly, if John Wick was turned into a video game, I think that would be amazing. These movies feel like you're watching a video game. The way that scene played out with the cinematography and the amazing action, especially with the Dragon's Breath shotguns, it was insanely fun to watch. Insanely fun to watch. The movie has probably the best action in the franchise. There's so many amazing action scenes in this movie. I can name so many times where I was just like, that was fun to watch. That was fun to watch. That was fun to watch. Again, I talked about the Dragon's Breath scene. Awesome. I loved that they threw in the Dragon's Breath shotguns, which seemed like something brand new that we hadn't seen before. There's this scene where John Wick has to get up a flight of stairs, but he continues to get just ambushed by assassin after assassin. It's insane how many good action scenes there are in this. Amazing. Just overall amazing. There's also, in the final duel, the final battle, I'm not gonna lie, I actually got some goosebumps. It was insane. I could not believe, like, that was one of those moments where I was actually questioning what was gonna happen. It wasn't like a clear answer as to what was gonna happen. You didn't know who was gonna die. You didn't know who was gonna live. You didn't know. It was amazing. It felt good to not know what was going to happen, because sometimes nowadays things get kind of cliched and you kind of know what's gonna happen. There, it was so unpredictable, and I actually was just worried for these characters, and it was insane. Very well put together. It actually had me wondering what was gonna happen. And again, I said earlier that there are a lot of new characters in this movie. Surprisingly, there are not a lot of returning characters, but in this movie, they introduce a lot of characters, but surprisingly, they balance each and every one of them very, very well. They give all of them that good, equal screen time that they needed to become likable and to become developed. And I feel like in another movie, they probably wouldn't have done it so well, but here they just did it to a T. Every character was very likable. Every character was well developed. Now, I thought this movie was amazing. If you get the chance, go watch it. If you haven't seen the other John Wick films, go watch them all. I love these movies. They're amazing. Be sure to go check this one out. It's definitely the best in the series. But here's some of the nitpicks that I had with this movie. Again, I thought this movie was amazing. A very, very well put together movie, but I did have some problems with it. So, or more like nitpicks. So, there's this character in the movie who's a blind character, and I'm not against blind characters being able to fight, but usually other movies do it more realistically. Here, there's this blind character who fights, and he kills a lot of people, and he has, like, dead-on aim, and all this other stuff, and he's killing so many people with guns, and I'm like, you can't give him that good of accuracy. And using a gun would, like, disorient a blind person if they were, You know what I mean? They have to rely on other senses, and I feel like using a gun would probably disorient them. You know what I mean? Like, they wouldn't be able to hear anything. So if you gave the blind guy, I think his name was Kane, if you gave him like silenced pistols, I think it would have made more sense. But here they give him like loud ones and stuff, and it was a little unbelievable. It took me out of the action for a little bit. And then there's this character. He's like a mob boss. I think he's a member of the High Table. He's like a mob boss, and he's like a kind of like a Kingpin character, like Kingpin from Spiderverse. And he fights John Wick at one point, but he starts fighting, and he kicks John Wick. He roundhouse kicks John Wick over a railing. And I'm like, there's no way he could have done that. This guy's wearing these skinny jeans. He looks like he's like 300 pounds. There's no way he could roundhouse kick John Wick hard enough over a railing like that. Now, if he was a brawler character like Kingpin, where they have like those large hooks and those heavy punches, you know, something like that, then like, you know, like a brawler character like Kingpin from Spider-Man, that would have made a lot more sense to me. But here when he did that, I kind of it took me out of the action again. It kind of just took me out of the story for a little bit. I was like, there's no way. He's in these skinny jeans and everything. There's no way you could throw a roundhouse kick that hard. And I'm not gonna lie, there was one problem that I had with this movie, and the problem was that I didn't really know why John Wick was fighting. Like, this movie does such a good job at everything else, but explaining as to why John Wick was fighting as much as he was in this movie, it didn't make sense to me. In the first movie, it was about revenge. In the second movie, it was about paying a debt. In the third movie, it was about self-defense. But in this movie, it was a little confusing as to why he was fighting. Did he want to fight for redemption? Did he want to fight because he wanted to die? Did he want to fight because of this? Did he want to fight because of that? It's very confusing as to why he wants to fight in this movie. It really got confusing. Like, there was not really a clear moral. There were some times in this movie where I'm like, well, John, if you wanted to redeem yourself, then why did you do that? But if you wanted to do this, then why would you do that? There was a lot of things in this that I didn't fully understand. Like, we know from the very beginning that John doesn't have a lot to live for, but then why are you fighting so hard to, you know, like, it got very confusing in this movie. It got very confusing. And again, that's the only thing. And you know what's another thing too? I think this movie might have a director's cut in the future. The movie is almost 3 hours long, and there might have been some stuff cut out of the movie, and maybe there is an explanation somewhere as to why why there was no real clear explanation for that. I really just wanted an explanation as to why John was fighting in this movie. I didn't fully understand it. You know, it got a little confusing. And that was the only problem I had with this movie. I'm gonna be honest. Other than the nitpicks, that was the only problem that I had with this movie, is that maybe there's more to it that I missed. Maybe there's probably gonna be some videos out there explaining it. Maybe there's more to it that I missed. But that was my only problem with this movie. Other than that, I would say that this is an incredible film, near perfect. Honestly, like, the best John Wick film, best in the series. Again, other than those nitpicks and that problem, I think this movie's incredibly well put together. Very, very good movie. Be sure to go check out John Wick 4 in theaters. I don't want to talk too much about this film because I want y'all to go watch it. Go watch it. You're going to get some insane action scenes, insane characters, everything. It just goes over the top. It takes all of the best elements from the other John Wick movies and it crams them into one amazing film. Be sure to go check it out. Have y'all seen John Wick 4? What did you guys think of it? I think it's the best in the series. I think it's amazing. The Void War Great Horizons is a brick film created by Twisted Bricks and his team. They've been working on it for the past 2.5 years, and I'm not gonna lie, it's actually a really good brick film. If you're looking for something really cool to watch, like a brick film, if you're a fan of stop motion and you're a fan of brick films, I would definitely recommend watching this film. The film, let's just talk about a really quick summary of what the film is about. So it takes place thousands of years into the future. Mankind is at a war with this strange fungus that has appeared called slag. It's this strange sentient fungus that consumes and it infects everything that it touches, and they're in this ongoing war with it, and we follow these survivors of this war, and they're living on this ship called the Impervious, this spaceship, and there's an infection, not infection, and contamination on the ship, and there's a lot of people get infected. There's a lot of contamination on the ship, so they have to clean the ship using a protocol, and the protocol basically wipes out all life on the ship so that they can restart everything. And it's up to our survivors, the ones we're following in the movie, it's up to them to get to a stronghold before time runs out. Otherwise, they will be evaporated with everything else on the ship. And I'm not gonna lie, this film is actually good. Be sure to go check the film out if you are interested in it. There's a lot of cool things in this film. I think it's actually a good brick film. I think it's a good film overall. Definitely be sure to go check it out. I'll leave links to everything in the description. It's only $2 on Patreon, guys. And if you want to watch, there's the first 40 minutes of this film. The first 40 minutes of this film is available on Twisted Bricks' YouTube channel. So if you want to watch the first half of this film, and if you like what you see on there, be sure to go check out the rest. Again, it's only $2 on Patreon, and I'll leave links to everything in the description. So let's talk about the actual film. The film is actually good from a critical standpoint. I will say there was a lot of impressive stop motion in this film. Comparing it to other stuff that Twisted Bricks has made, to what Christian's made, there's a lot of cool things in this film, a lot of cool techniques. There's a lot of advanced lighting techniques. There's a lot of advanced stop motion. There's a lot of advanced camera techniques. A lot of things. You got to remember that it's hard to do some of these things in stop motion. So for him to kind of go the extra mile in this film, it really showed how far he's come since like what he's. If you've seen his other stuff, it shows you how much better he's gotten. So again, the stop motion in this was amazing. I loved the lighting techniques. I loved everything in this film. Stop motion was amazing. I also like how the film mixed in some 3D animation in there. I'm pretty sure that was done using Blender, but pretty good animation there as well for the most part. Overall, again, the animation was definitely the highlight for me. I loved it. The storytelling in this was also good as well. It definitely felt like a real movie. It definitely felt like something you'd see in theaters. I liked the story of this film. It felt familiar, but also very different to what you'd see in other films. I liked a lot of these characters as well. The characters in this film were also good. I feel like most of them were developed pretty well. I feel like some of them could have used a little more development, but I feel like they needed more development, but not in this film. I feel like they need more development in other films. And since this film is supposed to be a part of a 3-movie trilogy, I totally understand why there wasn't a lot of focus on certain characters. Again, some characters could have used more focus, but I feel like that should be saved for other films. Now, usually with movies, there's one or two things that I don't like about it, but for this movie, there wasn't really anything about it that I said, oh, that's bad, that needs to be changed. There was nothing I said, hey, that really ruined the movie. Overall, I would say that this movie doesn't have any flaws. Like, it doesn't have many flaws. There's only nitpicks, in my opinion. I do have a few nitpicks here and there that we'll talk about in just a second, but overall, I would say that this is a good brick film. It's overall very, very well put together. There's a lot of cool things to enjoy in this. The characters are cool. The story is cool. The cinematography, especially with the stop motion, the animation, the lighting, the special effects, the music as well. That was all very well put together, especially the editing as well. Very good. Very well put together. Now, let's talk about the nitpicks, though. I had a few nitpicks, and one of them was that Huxley, the main character of the movie, he has these apparitions and hallucinations in the film that, like, they're spread out throughout the entire film. And basically, he's had some trauma in his past, and we don't fully know exactly what that was about. We get a little bit of hints here and there, but I would have liked to see more of what it was actually about. And I actually emailed Christian, the creator, and he told me that it was being saved for another film. That explanation was being saved for another film, which is totally fine if it is being saved for another film. That's one of the hard things about reviewing a movie like this, is that since it is a part of a 3-movie trilogy, if there is something in here that I do not like or I think should be changed or improved, then it's kind of hard because maybe that will be improved in a future movie. You know what I mean? It's a little hard. But yeah, I think they could have used a little more focus, but since it's going to be saved for another movie, then not for the second movie, then I think that's fine. I will say though, if if Christian does decide to not use, like, to not explain that trauma in the second movie, there is a place to perfectly include it. There's a scene where Huxley, the main character, he goes to sleep, and there not much really happens there, but if he goes to sleep and he has a nightmare and then wakes up and has an interaction with one of the other characters, Iris, then I feel like that would be the perfect way to explain what his trauma was without having to include it in the second movie. That's if it doesn't get included in a future movie. The perfect way to fix that would be to add a scene where he has a nightmare about it, about the actual event that's causing the trauma, something like that. That's the perfect way to fix that. Another problem that or not really problem, every time I say problem in this review, it's more like a nitpick. Another nitpick that I have is that there's not a lot of action in this film. There's a lot of good dialogue. Of course, everything else in this film is great. The action, there is some action in this movie, and that action is good, but I do feel like there's a little bit of a lack of it. I feel like it kind of feels like Moon Knight. Moon Knight had like a mystery going on, and while the mystery was really good, and that's really what the best of the show was about, we all wanted to see a little more action. And the finale of Moon Knight was the perfect opportunity to give us more action, but they didn't give us a lot. Here is the same thing in my opinion. The whole movie's really good, and it has interesting characters and everything like that to keep you in. There is some action here and there, but it didn't feel like it was it didn't feel like there was that much in it. I would say that I think if there was a scene right before they get to the stronghold, I would have added, and this is just me, I think I would have added a scene, like a big fight scene of them just like having to go through one last room before they get to the stronghold, then have that be kind of like the final battle. Then after that, when they get to the stronghold, that could be like the final climax. I just would have liked to see a little more action, especially with like the more improved animation. It would have been cool to see more of that. Again, it's fine without anything like that, but it would have been cool to see more of it. Another thing about the film that I feel like could have been done a little bit better is that it really doesn't feel like it takes them that long to get from point A to point B, in my opinion. They have to go through this sort of journey to get to the stronghold, and I want to say it takes them like 40 minutes. I might have to check that again, but it does take them a decent amount of time to get there, but it didn't feel like it took them that long to get there. It feels like before you know it, they're already at point B, you know? Like they have the it really does feel like that, in my opinion. It feels like it doesn't take them that long to get to somewhere. It really doesn't feel like that. Even though there are several things that happen, it didn't feel like it took them that long. And I also feel like they should have I feel like the characters should have been a little more worried about the evaporation. I feel like the idea of getting evaporated and that's how you die with no trace left, something like that would have been very scary to think about, but it didn't feel like it was that urgent in this movie, I will admit. Like, it didn't feel like it was as urgent as it should have been. It should have been like, hey, it should have been a little more scary. It should have been a little more of a threat to them, thinking, hey, we got to get here soon or else we're going to be disintegrated. You know, it's a scary thought. It's a scary thought, but it wasn't as like scary, or it didn't seem as much of a threat in the movie as I think it could have felt like. And in the movie, they say that our main characters are like the last survivors on that ship, and it was a little just hard for me to believe that there were only a few people left alive, and like only so many of them could have made it to the stronghold. Like, when you look at the size of the Impervious, which, by the way, it's like the size of a Star Destroyer from Star Wars, it looks like there must be like 500,000 people on that ship. That's how big it looks. Here is almost the same thing. I'm like, you can't tell me that like all of them died. Like, maybe all of them did die, but I feel like maybe showing us more of that, maybe showing us more of like, because we see a few scenes of people getting contaminated and like rooms of people getting killed and stuff like that. But I feel like if they made it, I feel like if the movie had done a better job at showing us that the entire ship is dead, then it would have been a little more believable. I feel like if there were a few scenes of just maybe surveillance footage of countless rooms getting slaughtered, and we see just a few people making it out, something like that, or a few people making it off of other escape pods. You know, there is like a few characters that make it off of escape pods. If they did something, if there was something like that in the movie, where we get to see a bunch of people getting killed. Like, not just a few, a bunch of people getting killed. And it makes it more believable that the entire ship is dead, or at least most of the people on the ship are dead. And if we see some people jumping out of escape pods and actually making it out, then I think it would have been more believable. I think my final nitpick with the film has to be that the cliffhanger at the end of the movie is not that... It's not that suspenseful, in my opinion. I think that, and I know y'all are going to ask, oh, what is the cliffhanger? What is the cliffhanger? Definitely watch the movie. But basically, another contamination happens. And I'm not going to lie, I thought this cliffhanger could have been a lot more suspenseful. We've seen so many monstrous creatures in this universe, like versions of Slag, that is so monstrous and so, like, creepy and nasty and stuff, that in that movie... or not in the movie, in that cliffhanger, when we see just a normal looking Slag, a normal looking blob, it doesn't feel like it's that threatening. It really did not feel like it was that threatening. If it was a creepy looking one and you see like multiple people getting killed, we see like 1 or 2 people get killed by it. If it was so many people getting killed by it and it seemed like something like out of control already, then I think it would have been a little better. It would have made it really seem more of a threat, more of something to be worried about. Here it seems like a small Slag, a small little blob. It doesn't feel like it's that important. It doesn't feel like it's that threatening to us or the audience, or it doesn't feel like it's that threatening to our characters. It looks like one little Slag character, one little monster that it feels like any character could probably just go over there and kill. It doesn't feel like an unstoppable monster that, we haven't seen before, or something that, it's out of our control already, you know what I mean? Now, I said that was the last nitpick, but I do have one more, just a really, really quick one. I will say that there was this scene where this guy screams, right? And he basically gets infected, and he screams really loudly, or it's supposed to be very loud, but I don't know who voiced him. I'm not trying to be rude to whoever voiced him, but the scream that he gave off did not sound very, it didn't sound very painful. It didn't sound very powerful, in my opinion. Like, it didn't sound as, powerful as it should have been, and I feel like if it was more powerful, it would have given more impact to the audience. And then the following scene right after that, or no, it's in the same scene, but right after that, there's a transformation where he starts to go like vampire style, or not vampire, like Frankenstein, or not Frankenstein. Why am I keep saying Frankenstein? Werewolf style, starts to turn into a monster, right? And I feel like if it had been more painful, like there's some screams here and there, but they're kind of muffled, and they don't seem very painful. They don't seem very loud. I feel like if those screams were louder and it seemed like a painful process, it would have been something that was unsettling, and it would have been something that was unsettling, and it would have been something that felt really important and really creepy, But because the scream doesn't sound very painful, it doesn't sound very loud, it doesn't sound very powerful. I know powerful is a weird word to use, but it doesn't feel very powerful. If it was more powerful, and I feel like if the screams were more painful, maybe adding some bone crunching effects when he turns into a Slag monster, it would have been unsettling, and it would have felt weird, but in a good way. It would have been man, that must hurt, something like that. It would have felt a lot more impactful, basically. But those are basically all of my nitpicks. Again, I'm trying to give my constructive criticism, because I know Christian's going to watch this video. I have a good feeling he's going to watch this video. This is just my constructed criticism, Christian. I'm not trying to trash on your movie. I'm not trying to do anything like that. I'm just trying to give my constructive criticism so that the future movies can be better. You know what I mean? I think that's the best thing. I think sometimes that's the best thing somebody can do, is give constructed criticism to somebody to improve. And I feel like improvement's very important to basically everything in your daily life. But yeah, this movie is great. I loved it. There's a lot of good things in this movie. Of course, I had some nitpicks, but I always have nitpicks with every movie. What did y'all think of this movie? Did y'all like this movie? Did you enjoy it? Have y'all seen it? Be sure to go check it out. If you want to see the first half of this film, it's on Twisted Bricks' channel. overall great film. The music was good, the animation was good, the voice acting was good for the most part. The story was good. I already say story. Everything about it, overall good film. I'd have to give it like an 8 out of 10. I usually don't do that, but yeah, good film. Overall good film. Be sure to go check out the first half of it on Twisted Bricks' channel, and if you want to see the full movie or the second half of the movie, be sure to go check it out on Patreon. It's only $2. But yeah, what did y'all think of this movie? Have y'all seen it? I'm not sure. So I just finished watching all 6 Star Wars movies for the first time, and here's what I thought of them. So just to let you guys know, this is like, I never grew up with Star Wars, okay? I always grew up with stuff that my parents grew up with. So if my parents grew up with Jurassic Park or Indiana Jones or He-Man, I grew up watching those things, you know? And since my parents never grew up watching Star Wars, I never grew up watching Star Wars, you know? So only recently, like I think it was about 6 months ago, did I say, hey, like, I should check out Star Wars. You know, my uncle, who's a big Star Wars fan, he's always urging me, he's like, hey, you should watch Star Wars, you should watch Star Wars. Finally, I decided to check out all 6 Star Wars movies, and I thought that they were good. I really did think that these were amazing films. I just want to say real quick, I'm not trying to offend any fans of Star Wars, but I thought this trilogy was severely overrated, but not bad, if that makes sense, okay? I thought these films were actually amazing. There's so much good world building, storytelling, cinematography. There's a lot of storytelling. There's a lot of good stuff in there. Like, I remember one of my favorite scenes in Star Wars is where Luke is looking off at the sunset. That's a really good scene. Not to mention John Williams' music. It's amazing in Star Wars, you know? I swear, back in like the 80s and 90s, man, he was going crazy with music. I'm not even kidding. Like, I don't know, Star Wars 70s, 80s, you know what I mean? That's when Star Wars came out, but John Williams was going crazy with music back then. Like, his music was amazing, and his Star Wars music is no different. And again, like, there are so many good things in Star Wars. Again, the storytelling, the characters, the story itself, the world building, the emotion, everything in it is really good. I will say that the action is not as good as I thought it was going to be in the originals, but I understand due to like it being such an old film. Honestly though, like in the prequels, that's where like the fight scenes got really, really good. I don't think the fight scenes ever got better after the prequels. And I really think that like Star Wars as a whole is a good trilogy. The original trilogy, I thought it was really solid. I thought that they were great films. I just don't think they deserved the recognition and the insane and immense amount of fame that they got. They got so much fame. Like, every single time you hear, like, imagine, like, you just go looking around at a Comic-Con. It's impossible to go to a Comic-Con and not see somebody mention or dress up as a Star Wars character. It's impossible, you know? The fan base is so big and powerful, and I just kind of wonder where they got all the hype, you know what I mean? I do love the Star Wars trilogies. It's just I don't really understand where it all came from, because I would consider the original Star Wars trilogy to be like a masterpiece, especially if it's like the Star Wars, right? Before I saw Star Wars, right? I always considered it as like a historical film. You know what a historical film is? Not like something that took place back in the day. No, I'm talking like a film that The Wizard of Oz or the Ten Commandments. Like, those are historical films because they revolutionized cinema. That's what I always saw Star Wars as, and I still see Star Wars as a film like that. Not just as a great trilogy, but I also see it as a historical film. Here, I don't know, with the fans and stuff, I understand if people love it because it's such a historical film and it's such a great trilogy, but I don't understand why people love it as much as they do, you know? I swear, Star Wars is almost like cancel culture. You cannot like have a hot take on Star Wars and not have a bunch of people screaming at you saying, no, that's not how it should have been. I actually kind of agree with Harrison Ford when Harrison Ford said that Han Solo should have died. I kind of agree with him. But yeah, I don't know. I love Star Wars. I actually like Star Wars a lot. This video might seem like I hate Star Wars, but I actually like it a lot. I like the prequels a lot too. I like I don't know, Revenge of the Sith and the Phantom. I don't know, no, no. Sorry, the Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. I think those movies are not like very well put together, but they actually are really entertaining. Like the lightsaber fights in those movies are amazing. The stories in those movies are really interesting. It's just I didn't think that they were executed as well as they should have been. And I do think that like the Revenge of the Sith might be my favorite Star Wars movie, but the best one is probably Return of the Jedi or Empire Strikes Back. I do like Revenge of the Sith a lot though. Really like that movie. But like I don't think the prequel trilogy is perfect. I just think that like the first two are entertaining, but they're not that good. Revenge of the Sith is really good, and then I think the original trilogy is like really, really good. I will say too, like, think about it. Put yourself in the shoes of a kid from the 80s or a kid from the 70s watching Star Wars for the first time. It must have been something else, man. Nowadays, we have all this CG, but imagine watching that when it first came out. It was something else. Like, you just see a lot of the scenery and a lot of the shots in Star Wars, and, it was something else, you just couldn't, it was a different experience back then. Again, I do say that I like Star Wars a lot. I love its universe. I love its characters. Everything about the original trilogy is really great. Would I call it a masterpiece? Maybe. It's just that the fan base is really like, I don't know. They claim it to be like a flawless trilogy, and I would not say that it's a flawless trilogy. There's stuff here and there that I think could have been improved or should have been done a little bit differently. But I do think it is a great trilogy, an amazing trilogy. I'm glad I saw Star Wars. This video might seem like, oh, you hate Star Wars, because I did some recordings a while ago, and it really did make it seem like I hated Star Wars. But no, I like Star Wars a lot. I really do like Star Wars a lot. I really like the prequel characters too. Like, I think a lot of the prequel characters are enjoyable. A lot of the original trilogy characters are enjoyable. I've also seen the Book of Boba Fett, The Mandalorian, and Obi-Wan, and while some of them were not as good as others, I still enjoyed them a lot. Again, I do think that Star Wars is a great franchise. I just think that it doesn't really deserve the amount of, like, hype as it does, you know what I mean? Like, there are so many people that claim it to be, like, they just look into the tiniest details of the movie, but it's one of those films that I think you should go into details, but I don't think you should go that far, Again, I think that Star Wars is a great, great trilogy, historical film as well. I just think that maybe the fan base is one of the worst parts of it. Worst and best. But what do y'all think of Star Wars? Are y'all Star Wars fans? What do y'all think of Star Wars? I would like to get the perspective of like a longtime Star Wars fan. I've only been a Star Wars fan for maybe like half a year by this point. I would like to know y'all's opinion. Why do y'all like Star Wars? I'm interested in that, because while I did like the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy, it didn't have like the biggest impact on me as a lot of other people did. I did like them a lot. It just, I didn't get the same reaction out of it as a lot of other people. So what do y'all think of Star Wars? I would like to get the perspective of an old, long-time fan of Star Wars. Why do y'all like Star Wars? Why do you like it so much? Why is it good? Why is it a masterpiece, I would really like to know. So I just finished watching the original Lord of the Rings trilogy, and here's what I thought of it. So I never grew up with Lord of the Rings. I know I didn't grow up with Star Wars. I didn't grow up with Lord of the Rings. I didn't grow up with a lot of things. But I didn't grow up with Lord of the Rings. I grew up with Narnia. And Narnia was my introduction to just fantasy in general, the fantasy world, the fantasy universe, that kind of thing. And Lord of the Rings kind of took that awesomeness that I loved in Narnia, and it took that feel of fantasy, and it cranked it up to 100. It really did take a fantasy world, and it did so much with it. Now, I remember I was watching The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly a while ago for another video, and some people were saying that, like, oh, 3-hour movies are way too long, and I'll admit there are some movies that are way too long, but the Lord of the Rings franchise, the Lord of the Rings trilogy, I think that the Lord of the Rings trilogy is a good example of that being okay. I really do think that, I was watching John Wick 4 a while ago. John Wick 4, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and the Lord of the Rings trilogy, those are like 3-hour epics. You know what an epic is? That honestly, epic is the perfect word to describe Lord of the Rings. An epic is an epic story, an epic tale, and I do see those movies as epics. That's what they are. Instead of just watching an hour of walking, talking, action, no, I'm watching 3 hours of cinema. I'm watching amazing, amazing movies, and it's just the best that they had to offer, and I loved it. That's really what those films were: The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, John Wick 4, and the Return of the King, and the rest of the Lord of the Rings movies. That's what those are. They are epic stories that really do feel like epic tales. It's like 3 hours of just pure cinema, storytelling, everything. It's just all done to a T. Now, there are some things in Lord of the Rings. I do love Lord of the Rings, by the way. I love it. I'm really glad that I checked it out. Awesome movies. Great, great movies. I think that there were a few things that I did not like, though. There were some things that I think could have been done way better. So, one, there's this weird subplot with Arwen's life force being tied to the ring. I didn't fully understand that. It really was not explained very well, and I was kind of like, when did that happen? There were also some flashbacks with Arwen, and I didn't really understand. I feel like there were flashbacks, but they didn't explain as much as I needed them to. I was just kind of like, wait, when did that happen? When does this take place? And some of it just got a little confusing. The ring wraiths kind of disappear for a little while, and then they show up again in like the other movies. It's a little weird. They also don't really explain what happened to them. They don't really explain what happened to them. There's a scene where like Arwen, I don't know, she like defeats them all, but there's no explanation as to what happens to the ring wraiths, Then also, this is my biggest like problem with Lord of the Rings, but it really is, it's a big problem, but like it doesn't ruin the film for me. Saruman, for me at least, was the best character, or at least the best villain in Lord of the Rings. Like, Sauron, in my opinion, was never really that cool. He's this giant, like, fire eyeball. Now, it's okay if you want him to just be, like, evil incarnate or something. But for me, Saruman was, like, the real villain, That's how I felt about Saruman. Saruman, played by Christopher Lee, who's an amazing actor, rest in peace. He did an amazing job playing Saruman. And I thought that he, just in my opinion, was like the real villain. I thought he was like evil. I thought he was awesome. I thought he was really cool and everything like that. But he was like everything that Sauron wasn't for me. And I felt like Saruman should have been focused on a little more. Now, I'm not sure if like the books or like something like that, the books didn't have this or the books don't say this, and maybe if it falls a little out of line with the book. But I think Saruman should have been in the final battle. Now, Saruman had a death scene, right? Saruman in the theatrical cut, Saruman's death scene was cut out entirely. And I think it should have been left in because I thought it was a very important scene to include because it really wraps up Saruman's story. But I feel like they should have, they had to cut it out for like the length of the movie. But I think they should have cut down on some of the other scenes because in my opinion, some of the other scenes didn't need to be there, or some of the other scenes could have been trimmed. I feel like they could have cut corners somewhere else, if that makes sense. I feel like Saruman's death was just way too important to leave out. And like, even Saruman's death, I just thought it wasn't like satisfying. It goes by really quickly. It feels like really rushed or like a quick way to finish him off and like get him over with. I feel like his character deserved a little more justice than that. But why do I think Saruman should be in the final battle? Here's why. Saruman, again, for me is the best villain, and I feel like he should have been the main villain. But I understand why it's Sauron. I think he should have been in the final battle. He should have survived till the end. And I think if, when Frodo and Sam are on their way to the volcano to destroy the ring, I think Saruman should have gone over to try and kill them. But Gandalf, Gandalf abandons the army and fights Saruman. So you have Saruman and Gandalf fighting. Then you also have the army the two armies fighting. Then you also have Frodo and Sam trying to get to the volcano. It would have been epic to see something like that. That's really how I feel like it should have ended for Saruman. Something like that would have been so much cooler. And I think it would have like really brought justice to the character. Again, I do love Lord of the Rings a lot, and I think these are solid films. That's just the only thing that I said, man, that needs some fixing. That was kind of bad. But again, I do love the Lord of the Rings trilogy. It is an epic story, a 3-part, 3-hour, more than 3 hours, but each movie is like 3 hours long. Epic story. And I love the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I'm really happy that I checked it out. What is y'all's favorite Lord of the Rings movie? My favorite is Fellowship of the Ring. It just felt like the humble beginnings of the Lord of the Rings story. It like to the Two Towers and Return of the King were really long. They got kind of confusing. I really did like Fellowship more because it really was the humble beginnings of this epic Lord of the Rings story, you know? It was kind of setting up everything, and I like that a little bit more. But what do y'all think of Lord of the Rings? Do y'all like Lord of the Rings? Have you seen it? Are you like a longtime fan? I like to get the perspective of a longtime fan of Lord of the Rings. I've only been one for maybe half a year at this point. So I'd like to get your opinion. Why do you like Lord of the Rings? Do you love it? Have you seen it? I'd love to know in the comments. So I just finished watching The Mandalorian Season 3, and it was pretty bad. So this was one of the few Star Wars projects that I was actually looking forward to. With Obi-Wan, Book of Boba Fett, and Andor, I was kind of looking forward to them, but I wasn't sure if they were going to be good. Because we knew that like Rogue One was good, we knew that the prequels were a bit iffy, but Mandalorian, we knew 100% that the previous 2 seasons were really good. So the 3rd season was something that I was really anticipating. With Obi-Wan and Andor and a bunch of other stuff, I just wasn't really sure if they would work in a TV show. But Mandalorian we knew would work in a TV show, and we knew that a 3rd season had a lot of potential. Unfortunately, it seems like that was wasted. Mandalorian Season 3 is a big disappointment. It really is. I think it's better than Book of Boba Fett, like in terms of being well put together, but man, dude, it really misses the mark. There are so many things in Mandalorian Season 3 that are just questionable, and like, it's like, why did you do that? Or why would you waste time on that? Or why? Just why? I feel like this season has a goal. Like, it has a destination, but it doesn't know how to get there. And it feels like there is no direction on how to get to that destination. Obviously, the destination was reclaiming Mandalore and, uniting the Mandalorian tribes together. We knew that what the destination was going to be, but the journey to that destination was not at all good or not at all satisfying. There were some episodes here and there where I was like, yeah, you know what, that's fun or that's good, but it really wasn't as good as the other seasons. There's a couple episodes where I'm like, you're wasting our time by that point. Like with the other seasons, like season 1, right? Season 1 was obviously inspired by like the Man with No Name westerns, the Clint Eastwood westerns. Obviously, it was inspired by those. It's just this cowboy who goes around on different planets or different towns and goes through one adventure to the next, And season 2 had a little bit more of a goal with trying to get Grogu and reuniting him with the Jedi. This one, I feel like, had a clear goal, It wasn't like season 1, where season 1 was just kind of like, okay, let's do adventure after adventure and have some fun. Here it was like, okay, we know what we need to do and we know we have to do it, but it feels like there's no direction to that. It really doesn't feel like it. Like in the other seasons, I was fine with like wasting our time because I was having so much fun with these random man with no name, man with no face adventures, Here, I'm like, why are you throwing those episodes into a story that needs more story? There needs to be more of a constructed story. This isn't the season to waste our time and to give us a bunch of episodes about random adventures. Season 1 and 2 were purposely made to be like the Man with No Name or just, an adventure, have a fun, westernish adventure. Here it really does feel like they're wasting our time when we know we have bigger fish to fry, bigger things to do. There are some episodes in here where I'm just like, you're wasting our time, man. There's an episode that has a bunch of celebrities in it. There's like Jack Black and Christopher Lloyd. And Christopher Lloyd is always a plus in my opinion. He was actually like the best celebrity in that episode. But like when you had Jack Black and other celebrities, it felt so off. And like that whole episode, aside from maybe the ending of that whole episode felt like a waste of time. The ending was like important to the story, but man, it felt so awkward. It felt like I was having some kind of dream. Like that's how weird and like random it felt, There were some episodes that were pretty good though. There was the one where they have to rescue a bunch of I think it was like, I don't know how many foundlings. I thought it was a couple, but maybe it was just one. They have to rescue these foundlings from this like nest, and I thought that was kind of cool. I felt like it mixed the Mandalorian, like the classic formula of the Mandalorian, the man with no name thing, and I feel like it mixed it well with what the current story was having. But after that, it really did feel like, I was like, what are we doing? Like, what are we doing here? You know what I mean? I also feel like this show is more of a Bo-Katan show than a Din Djarin show. First of all, Din gets kind of nerfed in this season. Like, remember at the beginning, he was like disintegrating people with his rifle and stuff, and he was like not unstoppable, but he sure was one tough bounty hunter. Now he feels a little more nerfed, I'm not gonna lie. And like, I don't think this is even a Din Djarin show anymore. One, they nerfed him a lot, and he does do a few things here and there, but it feels like a lot of the focus was given to Bo-Katan. And I have not finished watching Clone Wars. I have a lot of things to do, so I don't really have a lot of time to watch all of Clone Wars, but I will eventually. But I haven't watched Clone Wars, so I don't know much about Bo-Katan, but I know the basics of her story. I kind of know what her story is, that, she failed Mandalorian. She took the Darksaber when she wasn't supposed to, and doomed Mandalore. And I'm not gonna lie, I actually kind of, like, from what I've known about Bo-Katan, I actually liked the little bit of redemption in this season. I like the idea of Bo-Katan redeeming herself and becoming the rightful ruler of Mandalore and stuff. But I honestly, I felt like it was cool to see Bo-Katan get some redemption, but taking a lot of spotlight away from Din really felt off. It was kind of like, wait, we're still watching The Mandalorian, not Bo-Katan, the series, And I'm not gonna lie, and a lot of people, they get mad about the Baby Yoda thing, how they took Grogu back in Book of Boba Fett. A lot of people don't know this, but Book of Boba Fett actually takes place 2 years after Mandalorian Season 2. So, Baby Yoda and Luke were actually training for 2 years, and then Luke decided to take him back. Luke decided to send him off to the Mandalorian, So there was actually a little more time in between there. A lot of people thought that it was just, Din hands Grogu to Luke and Luke hands it back, No, it actually was like 2 years, There was a lot more to that than it seemed. That show just did a really bad job of portraying time. But in this season, Baby Yoda feels so forced. I'm not gonna lie. Like, yeah, he's cute and, he does cute things here and there, but man, it felt so forced. So forced. I'm not gonna lie, like, Baby Yoda doesn't even do a lot of things in this season. He only does a few things with his Force powers, and I'm surprised, like, he was with Luke for 2 years training. How did you not learn more Force abilities, And, like, in this season, he doesn't really do much. He kind of just stands around, or he does something cute, but it's not the same kind of cute in The Mandalorian Season 1 and 2. Here, it's a lot more like, it felt like marketing. It felt like Disney was really screwing around with this and trying to put Baby Yoda where Baby Yoda doesn't belong, It really does feel like he was kind of useless. Like, he didn't do much. He barely used his Force abilities. It felt like you just didn't need to have him there. And I love Baby Yoda. I love his little character, and I want to see where they take him. But here in this season, he just felt like another background character. He didn't do much, And even the finale of this season, it just wasn't even that satisfying. The finale is really short, which is weird because a lot of Disney Plus shows, well, at least the ones I've seen, they have some really weird finales that don't end properly or they don't deliver on what they were supposed to. Here, it's the same thing. It is really, really quick. It has to go by quick, you know. It doesn't give us enough space to breathe. Even like some of the stuff that just happens in the end was just not satisfying. And I feel like if they extended that like whole episode to maybe like an hour or an hour and a half episode, I think it would have been amazing. I feel like they had so much potential. And instead of making crappy episodes with Jack Black, I love Jack Black, by the way. It's just I didn't think he belonged in that Star Wars episode. Instead of making episodes with Jack Black and Christopher Lloyd, which again, I love both of those actors, but I just didn't think they belonged in Mandalorian. Instead of making episodes like that, make episodes about about the Mandalorian, about this awesome finale and stuff. There was so much potential for that. The finale was a big letdown. Like, not even much happens. Like, it's just, it was a massive letdown. I'm not even lying. It's just sad because I feel like this whole season had so much going for it and so many things to look forward to. The Mandalorians uniting and Bo-Katan getting a redemption and stuff, but it's all done so poorly. I would say that it's better than Book of Boba Fett, and maybe it's better than like Obi-Wan, but I don't know. I guess if you're a massive fan of Mandalorian, I don't think this will ruin anything. I don't think it'll ruin your perception of the Mandalorian, but it's definitely not as good as it should have been. It's definitely better than Book of Boba Fett in terms of being well put together, but it's not satisfying. But what do y'all think of Mandalorian Season 3? Is it a massive failure? Is it a dumpster fire? Was it all bad? I thought there was some good stuff in there, but overall it was kind of mid. What do y'all think about Mandalorian Season 3? I'd love to know in the comments. So I just finished watching The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly for the first time, and here's what I thought of it. So after playing Red Dead Redemption 2, the greatest cowboy game of all time, I thought, why not watch what is considered to be one of the greatest Western films of all time, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I thought this movie was amazing. I actually had so much fun watching this film. It really was just like a product of its time, when the Westerns were really, really popular. And I think I haven't seen that many other Westerns, but I think this is one of the best ones I've seen, but I haven't seen that many. But I did really enjoy this film. This film really has a lot of great things in it. There's a lot of layers to it. I like when a movie has layers to it. There's a lot of stuff in here that is the movie's filled with great cinematography, great characters. Everything about it is just great. Everything about it is just it's a perfect product of 1970s film, and I love it. It's a great, great film. The only thing about this movie that I think I would have changed is the Civil War sequence near the end of the film. There's this sequence where they have to blow up a bridge, but I feel like that whole sequence didn't feel that needed, if I'm being honest. Like, maybe they wanted to throw in like a war is bad message, or maybe they wanted to show a little more of what the Civil War could have been like. But other than like a few important things that happen here and there, I feel like they probably could have cut that part out of the movie, saved some time, saved some money, and then like reworked it, the story in another way. I just feel like that kind of just made the movie longer, and I feel like it wasn't as needed as it looked like it was, I really didn't think it was that needed, but it still works. It still works. Another thing I love about this film is that it doesn't forget to remind you things. Angel Eyes is the villain of this movie, and I love how at the beginning you see him do a lot of bad things, and it obviously shows you that he's the bad in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. But I like that later on when he's talking to Tuco, it almost seems like he's going to be an anti-hero, or he's actually a friend of Tuco. It seems like he's going to be a good guy. But it doesn't forget to remind you. It doesn't forget to remind you that he is the bad in This Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. He is a bad guy. It actually reminds you. Once it looks like he's going to be good, it reminds you why he's the bad. it shows him beating up Tuco and trying to get information out of him. It does such a good job at reminding you things. And I like it when we see Tuco for the first time. You think he's going to be one of those, like, drunk characters that just talks a lot of junk and talks smack, but he's not a good gunslinger and he has no credit behind his words, you know what I mean? But it doesn't forget to remind you that Tuco is actually a good gunslinger. There's the whole scene where he's in the gun shop and he's over here building his own custom revolver and he's over here shooting targets really well. It makes you, at the beginning when you first see him, it makes you think that he's going to be a character that's drunk or he's just going to talk smack and have nothing to back it up. He actually is a good gunslinger, and it reminds you of that. I like what the movie does with that. That's really, really well done. Not to mention the music in this movie. The music in this movie is phenomenal. I love all the music in this movie. It's all amazing. And there's that one scene, the one where Tuco's in the graveyard and he finds the gold. I think it's called Ecstasy of Gold. I would hear that theme used everywhere. I remember, like, for a little while that music was used in, like, every single movie. Only here does it feel like it was deserved and it felt like it was used perfectly. I'm pretty sure this is where it originated. I'm pretty sure Ecstasy of Gold originated from Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And in my opinion, I think this is one of the only times where I've seen a movie and it actually worked the way it was supposed to, you know? One thing that is a little weird to, like, compliment is that all of these sets and all of these places that you see are real. You know, nowadays we get so spoiled with CGI, but watching this film reminded me that all of those towns that we're seeing are real. All of those mountains we're seeing in the background are real. Everything in the movie was a real prop or a real place, you know? And I'm not gonna lie, after being exposed to so much CG nowadays, I feel like watching an old film like this really does refresh. It's very refreshing. It's very refreshing to watch a film like this and say, yeah, you know what? These characters are actually in that town and they're in those mountains or they're in the desert, you know? It actually felt very refreshing to watch something where you knew everything was real. I'm also really surprised that the dubbing in this film was really good. The dubbing in this film was surprisingly great. I'm not even kidding. Like, the voice acting really did match the characters. Like, there was never really a moment where I heard a voice and I said, nah, that doesn't really match with the character, or that doesn't really match with the emotion. They found a lot of good voices and voice actors to do a good job at, first of all, matching the lips of the characters, but also matching the look and feel of each scene and character. They did such a good job at that. I remember for a while I was kind of like, oh wait, this is actually dubbed? I thought these were the real voices of these people. Like, you know, every single voice match and every single voice matched the characters, and every single voice was very good. Like, they all did really good for those emotional scenes, and the voice acting was, like, actually good. Like, whenever there was an emotional moment, I actually felt the emotion coming from the voice. It wasn't sloppy by any means. Of course, Clint Eastwood was amazing in this. He really did an awesome job playing the man with no name. He did a really good job playing this cowboy that's an anti-hero as well. He's not... I like that too. After playing Red Dead, I love seeing cowboys be anti-heroes instead of just good or bad. I love seeing a character that will do some good, but will do some bad, or he'll do some bad to do some good, you know? I love characters like that, and I think Clint Eastwood did a perfect job of playing Blondie or the man with no name. I kind of want to know what people call him, because he is the man with no name, but I want to know, do people call him Blondie? I'm not really sure. I also saw A Fistful of Dollars, and I was going to do my own review for that one, but I don't have as much to say about it, so I think I'll just include it here. I liked that movie a lot, too. I think I like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly more than Fistful of Dollars, but The Fistful of Dollars was also amazing. I love that movie as well. A lot of good, iconic scenes in that film as well. A lot of good cinematography. Also, just overall a great film. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see for a few dollars more because they took it off of YouTube before I was able to finish watching it. Otherwise, this whole video would have been a Dollars Trilogy review, but instead it's mostly a Good, the Bad, and the Ugly review. I will say that there is something different about The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. There's something about watching films like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Indiana Jones, and a lot of other iconic masterpieces that it just stands out. There's something about these films that when you watch them, there is a different feeling in the room. There's a different feeling when you're watching it on screen. You know, when you watch these masterpieces of cinema, there is something different about them. And it's a little hard to explain because I don't think it can be pinned down in one area. I think a masterpiece of a film needs to have amazing music, amazing cinematography, amazing actors, amazing everything. Everything has to be good. And I feel like movies like Indiana Jones, like Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, they do such a good job at that. Everything about these films are just 10 out of 10 or 9 out of 10, just very well done, very well put together. And again, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly and Fistful of Dollars are no different. I loved these films, really, really enjoyed them. Glad I checked them out. I'm planning on checking out more Westerns now, honestly. I really enjoyed these, and I'm planning on checking out more of them. Any Westerns y'all recommend in the comments? I'd love to know. I'm also going to try to check out it for a few dollars more whenever I can, but I don't know where I can watch it at the moment. But what do y'all think of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly and Fistful of Dollars? Do you like these movies? Have you seen them? I would highly recommend checking them out whenever you can. These are really great films. I'm happy I checked them out. Really good, like, old 70s pure cinema, you know what I mean? Really good films. I like these movies a lot. Honestly, whenever I get the chance, I think I'll watch The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly again. I enjoyed it that much. So I just finished watching Wednesday for the first time, and it was pretty good, but not as good as everyone was saying it was. So when this show came out, I did not watch it for several reasons. One of those reasons was because Stranger Things Season 4 had came out a couple months before, and when it came out, I absolutely hated it. Like, there were so many things in it that I hated, and I said, no, that was bad, that was bad. And everyone else that was watching it said, this is a masterpiece, this is the best Stranger Things that we've had, you know, this is peak Stranger Things, best Stranger Things season of all time. I thought it was freaking trash. When this show came out, it had the same reception. A lot of people were saying, it's amazing, it's perfect, it's a masterpiece, you know, better than Stranger Things. That's the thing, I saw YouTube polls, and people were going, it's better than Stranger Things, it's better than Cobra Kai, and I'm like, what kind of stuff are y'all on? This is not as good as it, you know? This is nowhere near as good as those shows. I was like, this is nowhere near as good as Cobra Kai or Stranger Things. The other reason as to why I didn't watch this show when it came out was because I had never actually seen an Addams Family movie before, or any Addams Family project for that matter. I had never seen anything Addams Family related. I always grew up with Munsters, so I hadn't seen anything Addams Family, right? So I decided to watch the first Addams Family movie for this video, the one in the 90s. I had a lot of fun with it. It was a fun mix of these goofy characters with morbid comedy. I really liked it. It was really fun. Wednesday is a little different though because it is a mystery show. It has this ongoing mystery, and Wednesday is much more morbid in tone than the Addams Family. It has a much more serious and morbid tone. But like I said earlier, I actually liked this show a lot. I had a lot of fun watching it, and I was genuinely invested in several episodes. Did I think it was as good as everyone was saying it was? No, not at all. I thought this show was overrated. I'm just gonna be honest with y'all. I think this show was overrated. When I watched this show, I thought it was good, but I always thought that it was like the light version of Stranger Things, you know? It wasn't the real Stranger Things with compelling mysteries, flawless acting, and everything. I saw this as Stranger Things light, basically. I feel like it does a lot of the same things as Stranger Things, and I feel like it does some of those things well, but I don't think it does them as well as Stranger Things. It has a mystery, it has a darker tone, you know, it has these mysterious characters, and I feel like Stranger Things takes all of those things that Wednesday does, and I feel like it cranks them up to 100, and it perfects all of those things. I feel like Wednesday is, again, Stranger Things light, you know, again, it does all the things that Stranger Things does, but I don't think it does them as well. There were also some things in this show that I said, that's not too great, or that could have been improved, you know. There were several things in this show that got on my nerves. One of those was the cop. There was this sheriff character, and I don't know, man. Maybe it was understandable for the character, but I got kind of annoyed at the amount of times he just shrugs something off. He's like I remember his son. I forgot his name. I think his name's Tyler. His son. He's like dating Wednesday, and then he's just like, I don't want you hanging out with Wednesday or talking to her. And then when he catches them talking, he's like, I don't give a crap. And it's like, well, then what's the point? Like, this guy, I swear, he was like so funny. He's just like, well, I don't give a crap anymore. It was like, the why, like, say anything to begin with? And then he, like, every time Wednesday presents a clue to, like, this case, this, like, murder case, he's like, no, it's inconclusive. It's like that blonde, you always know, like, there's always that blonde lady who just, like, shrugs off everything. You know what I'm talking about, right? Like, in every single movie or show, there's always that, like, blonde chief of police that'll dismiss everything. I think y'all know what I'm talking about. This guy's, like, the male version of that character. And then there was a love triangle in the show, and other than Wednesday, I didn't care about these other two characters that much. Also, these two other characters, in the first episode, I actually got these characters mixed up a lot, because they're both, like, white with a sort of brownish blonde hair, and if you, like, saw them from afar, you would definitely mistake these two for each other. I wish they would have put a little bit more, like, different, like, I don't know, I wish it would have made them a little more distinct from each other, because I did get confused with them a little bit, but as the show went on, I kind of recognized these characters a little more, so I got used to them. But at the beginning, I actually got these characters mixed up for each other. But speaking of the love triangle, I thought this love triangle was not the worst one I'd ever seen. The worst one I've ever seen was like in Korra. The one in Legend of Korra was so bad. It was like so unbelievably bad. It almost ruined 2 seasons because of that. It was like really, really bad. Here, it was actually kind of nerfed a little bit. I heard that other people were saying that like they didn't like the love triangle either, and I was definitely not a fan of this one because one, I didn't care about like 2 of the characters in it. And then, like, one, I didn't think they were even, like, that great. Like, I thought they were okay as characters, and I didn't think they were that great as love interests either. And, like, this show, it does kind of have a nerfed relationship, though. Like, it is, like, kind of nerfed compared to other ones. They don't make the biggest deal out of it, like in Korra. Like, in Korra, they put a lot of focus on it, and it gets really bad, really annoying. Here it was a little bit more nerfed, which made it more like tolerable, but I still didn't think it was that great. I still didn't think it was that great. One thing about Wednesday that is very interesting is Jenna Ortega's acting, because it actually is very impressive. A lot of people were like saying this, like, oh my gosh, the acting was incredible. That was one of the things that I was thinking was going to be overrated like the rest of the show. But no, the acting was actually really impressive, because when you have a character that doesn't like make a lot of like facial expressions and stuff, and it's a very stoic character, you might think that that's a character that would be easy to act as or be able to like just stand still and don't move. But there's a lot more to it. Like, there's a scene where one of the Addams family members is hurt, like very, very hurt. And Wednesday actually cries. And because that's the only bit of emotion that she ever shows, it actually is very impactful. There's a lot of there's a lot you can get from that one scene, because it's one of the only scenes where Wednesday cries in the whole show. So it's kind of good when when Wednesday doesn't show any emotion. The moment she does show any sort of emotion, it means something. And I like that a lot. There's some scenes where she smiles, she'll give like a smirk. Sometimes she'll blink too. She doesn't blink throughout most of the show, but when she does blink, you know something's up. There's a scene where she almost gets like caught trying to look for something, and she starts blinking because she doesn't really know what to do. And you know, little touches like that do add to the acting a lot, and I think it adds to the character a lot. Another thing I'll give this show is that I think the Tim Burton feel actually works in this show. A lot of other Tim Burton projects, the Tim Burton feel doesn't work. Like those weird Alice in Wonderland films, or just everything else he's worked on in the past couple of years. You know what I'm talking about. Here, I actually think it worked a lot. I felt like this was the perfect thing for Tim Burton to get his hands on and to work on. I actually liked the feel that he gave off. It was a very, like, gothic feel, and it had this, like, I I like the Nevermore a lot too. I like the idea of Nevermore. It looks like something straight out of like Hotel Transylvania. It looks like a Hotel Transylvania like school or something, like a boarding school. It looks awesome. I really liked the way that it looked. I like the creativity behind it. This idea like it's a school for outcasts, you know? I like the idea that even the police know that. They're like, yeah, like there's that weird school over there. Maybe the murders are coming from there, you know? I like that a lot. There was a lot of creativity in this show. And overall, I would say that, like, its writing, its characters, and everything, I would say that overall it is well put together. I just think that when people were saying, like, it's so funny, it's so good, like, I honestly, like, I don't remember a lot of jokes because I don't remember there being that many, and I don't remember them being funny. I don't remember there being any, like, funny jokes in this. If I'm looking for humor, I'm gonna go watch Cobra Kai. Maybe I'll watch Stranger Things. If I'm looking for a mystery, I'll go watch Stranger Things. You know, it's Wednesday is good. It is a good show. But if people say like, oh, I love it for its humor, I'd rather watch Cobra Kai. The humor over there is way better. If you're like, oh, well, I like it for its mystery, I would rather watch Stranger Things. I feel like its mystery is better. You know, I think one of the reasons why so many people liked Wednesday, though, was because it is such a different show than everything else on Netflix. It is such a different show, you know? It takes pieces of Addams Family, Tim Burton, Stranger Things, all of these, like even Hotel Transylvania. It takes pieces of all of these amazing films and shows and all these people, and it crams it all into one weird but unique show, you know? I actually think that this show is very unique, and it stands out among the crowd, you know? I feel like maybe that's one of the reasons why so many people like it and why so many people got into it the way they did, you know? I think that's the reason why so many people got into the show the way they did. They loved it so much because it was so unique. There really isn't another show out on Netflix that's like it. But like I said, overall, I thought it was good. I thought it was well put together, but I didn't think it was the flawless masterpiece that everyone was saying it was. I enjoyed it a lot, but it wasn't perfect. I am looking forward to season 2 though. I am looking forward to them improving the story, and I'm excited to see where it goes. But like I said, I would rather watch Stranger Things. I feel like it does everything that Wednesday does, but better. But what do y'all think of Wednesday? Is it good? Is it overrated? Have you seen it? I would love to know in the comments. Spider-Man Across the Spiderverse is an absolute masterpiece of a film. Who would have thought? Spider-Verse 1 is one of my favorite films of all time. I love the film. It is, in my opinion, it's a masterpiece and probably the best Spider-Man film. This movie is no different. I absolutely love this film. It is honestly just perfect. The pacing, the story, the characters, the animation, everything about it. They play all their cards right, and it is such a perfect movie. The problem is that everyone else has said the same thing, and there's nothing about this movie that I can say that no one else has said yet. The only thing about this movie that more of a nitpick really, that I didn't like, was that, and one of the biggest appeals of Spider-Verse is all of these animation styles clashing, right? In this movie, towards the beginning, towards like the first act of this movie, there were some scenes where I got kind of disoriented because of how much they threw at us. They were throwing so many animation styles at us and so much stuff at us that I actually got a little disoriented because I just didn't even know what I was looking at because they were throwing so much at us. That's really my only complaint with this movie, or more like just a nitpick. And that's really it when it comes to the stuff I didn't like or nitpicks. The rest of this movie is amazing. There were some audio issues, like I couldn't hear the characters, but I heard that was like a theater issue. I heard that they had already fixed that. Aside from that, so aside from those two things, I love this movie a lot. This movie is just, oh my gosh, again, this isn't going to be a long review because there's nothing about this movie that I can say that no one else has already said, which is unfortunate. I love how the first, 20 minutes of this movie is just dedicated to Gwen, Spider-Gwen, and her story. I'm really surprised. It actually takes us a while to get into the Spider-Verse, but I was never complaining. When are we going to get into the Spider-Verse? When are we going to get in the Spider-Verse? I was always wondering when we were going to get there, but I never complained because I didn't mind seeing more of Gwen. I didn't mind seeing more of Miles. Just seeing them living and a lot of the struggles that they go through, I did not mind seeing any of that. I wanted to see just a movie based on that, and I didn't mind. I didn't mind that, like, the first half of this movie just takes place in the normal world, you know? It takes a while to get to the Spider-Verse. And this movie also, I really love Miguel as a villain, and more like just an antagonist, not really a villain, but Miguel, I understand Miguel's reasoning for why he wants to stop Miles, and I also understand Miles' point of view. I like how you can definitely see both sides. You see Miguel as sort of an adult who understands what must be done, and then you also see Miles as somebody who really just wants to do what he believes is right. And I love both perspectives, and I understand both perspectives, and I love that. I also love seeing a lot of these characters again, you know? I really loved these characters in the first one, and seeing, like, Peter B. Parker show up and Gwen come back. It was really cool to see these characters on screen again. And I can't wait to see Spider-Noir, Penny Parker, and Peter Porker in Spider-Verse 3. Not to mention, the new spiders in this movie are amazing. Like Spider-Punk, I don't know if it's Spider-Punk or Spider-Rock, Spider-India. There's a lot of these new spider people that they introduce, and all of them are really fun to watch. You didn't really know what was going to come up too, because then there's like a cat Spider-Man, there's like a Western cowboy Spider-Man, and a car Spider-Man. You really didn't know what they were going to throw at you. At some point, and this came as a total shock to me, there was a Lego Spider-Man that showed up. And I love that. They do so much stuff at you. They really surprise you. And I think this movie, I think this was probably, aside from maybe John Wick, I think John Wick 4 was the last movie that I saw where I really felt like chills when I watched a movie. There is a lot of stuff that happens in the final act of this movie. There's a lot of like twists, turns, a lot of stuff like that. A lot of just mind-blowing stuff that happens near the end of the movie, towards the final act. Oh my gosh, is that stuff golden. Like, it is so goated, so golden, I swear. It is so good. There was a lot of scenes where I was reacting and the whole audience was reacting with me. Everybody was like, "Whoa," or like, you know what I mean? That kind of audience. That's the way that the movie affected the audience. It was freaking amazing. The ending of this movie, I absolutely loved it. A lot of people, I remember there was a group behind me when I was watching this movie. There was a group behind me that was disappointed that the movie ended on a cliffhanger. And I even got some comments on other videos saying, hey, like, I didn't like that it was a cash grab, that we needed a third movie, that it was unneeded. I feel like we should just let the creators of Spider-Verse take their sweet time, and because that's what they did. This movie really takes its time with everything. But because it takes its time, it's really setting up a lot of things, and it's setting up, in my opinion, what could be the best animated trilogy ever made. If you think about it, like, again, a lot of people were salty about this, but I was 100% fine, because this movie was originally named Across the Spider-Verse Part 1. You know what I mean? So we already knew a Part 3 was going to come out. This movie could become the Lord of the Rings or Star Wars of animation. Think about that for a second. Try to name some, like, amazing animated trilogies. If you tried to name, like, the Kung Fu Panda trilogy, I love the Kung Fu Panda trilogy. I think that's like one of the better animation trilogies. If you compare something like the Kung Fu Panda trilogy or other animated trilogies out there, they aren't really connected in like one big story, a big epic, you know? Lord of the Rings and Star Wars are in that kind of form, in an epic. And usually because animation is so expensive, animation studios don't get to make big epics with their films. Here, I feel like they are setting up a Lord of the Rings of animation, a connected masterpiece trilogy trinity of films, if that makes sense. The first one, perfect. This one, just as perfect. I feel like they are setting up something amazing. And a lot of people are salty so far. Like, so there were some people that were salty about it. They were like, no, like, we don't need a part 3. Why did they have to, like, do a part 3? I feel like they're taking their sweet time, and I am totally fine with it. Take your time. Take your time making a masterpiece of a film, and I honestly feel like if they keep making such incredible films like this, and if the next one is just as good as these other two, we could have a trilogy, like an animated trilogy, that's just as good as Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, and it's connected, you know what I mean? The Kung Fu Panda trilogy, I love the Kung Fu Panda trilogy. It's actually really underrated. That one is great, but it's not connected. This one, on the other hand, is connected. And I feel like, again, this could be the Lord of the Rings of animation or the Star Wars of animation, you know? I love this film so much, and I'm not sure if it's better than the first, but I absolutely love this film. And again, there is nothing about it that I can say that nobody else has, unfortunately. Just absolute 10 out of 10 film. Highly recommend. Guys, if you have not seen Spider-Verse 1, go check out Spider-Verse 1. If you loved Spider-Verse 1, you're going to absolutely love this film. It's just, oh my gosh, I cannot recommend this film enough. It gives me chills when watching, and I want to go watch this again whenever possible. This movie is one of the few that gave me chills. Just chills, man, honestly. I, again, highly recommend checking this one out whenever you can. If you get the chance, go check it out. If you haven't seen part 1, go check out part 1. I would highly recommend checking this one out, guys. I can't stress that enough. But what do y'all think of Spider-Verse 2? I absolutely love it. I've said this so many times in this video. I absolutely love it. Go check it out if you haven't already. It's just an incredible, perfect film. Best movie of the year, and probably the best movie of the decade. I don't think anything's really gonna top this film, to be honest. I don't think that many films are gonna top this movie. I think that aside from Spider-Verse 3, I really don't know what could come out that could top this masterpiece of a film, you know? So far, best movie of the decade, and the only thing that I think could beat it is part 3. But what do you think of Spider-Verse 2? Did you enjoy it? I bet you did. Did you see it? Have you enjoyed it? Do you want to go watch it? I mean, this is just, honestly, it's an experience. That's one of the best ways to describe this movie. It is an experience. Definitely go check it out whenever you get the chance. But I'd love to know what you guys think of it in the comments, because there's a lot of different viewpoints on this movie. A lot of people are saying different things. So I'd love to know what you guys think of this movie. I absolutely love it. The Sound of Freedom is a very powerful film about the dangerous and disgusting world of child trafficking. Before I get into this movie and what I think of it, I think I need to talk about the message and the topic of this movie before I actually get into the movie itself and whether or not it's good or whether or not it's put together well. The message of this movie is that God's children are not for sale, and I think this movie does an amazing job at telling that, because it really shows you the bad without having to show you the ugly, if that makes sense. There's nothing graphic, there's nothing shown on screen, but it's always heavily implied. But in a way, I feel like the movie, because usually when you're making a movie, you should always do the show, don't tell. But here, it is much better to tell. It is much better to imply, because you don't need to see something to know that it's there. Again, I feel like the movie does an amazing job at showing us the bad and telling us what the ugly is without actually showing us the ugly, if that makes sense. The movie never feels manipulative about what it's talking about. I'm sure if this was being made by other filmmakers that were corrupt or just bad people, they would try to abuse what they have, and they would try to manipulate the story to abuse this topic. But this movie is made by pure filmmakers, good people, that it's not like that at all. It is not manipulative at all. It does not take abuse of what this topic is. It does not abuse the topic. It does not manipulate it again in any way, which is a very good thing for this movie. It's a very good thing for this movie. And more or less, the first 20 minutes of this movie is just focused on kids getting kidnapped and showing you this just underworld of trafficking. And honestly, it's the kind of thing that'll make you sad. It'll piss you off as well. It'll just get you, it'll disgust you, you know? But it's supposed to do that. It's supposed to open your eyes up to this terrible world that we don't see, but it's there. You know, it's supposed to open our eyes up to that. And once you see it on screen, it'll piss you off. It'll get you sad. It'll make you hate these kinds of people, you know? And I feel like the movie does a very good job at that. I feel like I've said this before in the review, but it tells the message very well, and it tells it with the utmost respect. It really does treat this topic with as much respect as possible, and I feel like it does that so well, because this is something that is real. It's a very real topic. It's a very serious topic, and I feel like this movie perfectly addresses it, and it perfectly tells this story and this message of God's children are not for sale, and it tells it with the utmost respect, and I have to salute them for that. And while watching this movie, I really felt like it was a risky movie. I felt like there were a lot of risks being taken while filming it and publishing it, because think about what this movie is. This movie is about people exposing child trafficking for what it is, and they're exposing this world of it. So for this movie to be just about that and exposing it, that's already risky. Not to mention, a lot of the people that work on this movie, actors, filmmakers, writers, they work on this movie and they might not have a career after working on it, but they took the risk and they all knew that this was a story and a message that needed to be told. So they all decided to just work on this movie because it was a message and a movie that needed to be made. It needed to be told. And I will say that that is incredible. That's incredible. The movie itself is actually very well put together. Overall, I would say that the movie is good. I would say that this is a pretty good movie. I'd give it like an 8.5 or a 9. It is very well put together. A lot of great cinematography, not to mention the acting in this movie. A lot of great acting, a lot of great performances, but I think most of the cast, I don't think there was a single performance in this movie that wasn't good. Especially Jim Caviezel, like, his face, he looks very tired. He looks very tired. He looks like somebody who's seen things and he's been doing this job that just for the past, like, I don't know, I think he said he's been doing it for decades in the movie. Like, he looks like somebody who's seen a lot of things and has done a lot of things that he doesn't want to be a part of all this, but he has to do a job that no one else will. And I think he was perfect casting. This movie had like a $14 million budget, but it never looked like it was a cheap movie. I never really noticed a scene in the movie where it dipped in quality or it looked like they had ran out of money, you know? It seemed like maybe they had to cut corners, but even then I barely noticed. I really barely noticed. Usually the longer a movie gets, the higher the budget will go. Some 3-hour movies are really, really expensive to make, but this movie being like 2 hours long and only having, I think, 14 million, that is actually very, very impressive. For it to be 2 hours long, $14 million, and to look this good and to be this well put together, that is very, very impressive. The Sound of Freedom, have you guys seen this movie? If you guys haven't, I would highly recommend checking this one out. It has a very important message. God's children are not for sale. I've said this multiple times in the video, but that is a very important message, and I hope this movie reaches more people. It is a very well put together movie. I've said this multiple times, but it is well put together. It is a good movie with a great message, and I feel like this movie really needs to reach more people. But have you guys seen this movie? Did you like it? Did you enjoy it? Have you seen it? If you haven't already, go check it out. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny is a dial of disappointment. I really wanted this movie to be amazing. I really wanted this movie to be another amazing film in the Indiana Jones saga, but unfortunately, it's probably the worst. If you guys have been on the channel before, you'd know that I'm a massive Indiana Jones fan, and I've been a fan since I was a kid, and this was a movie that I was really looking forward to. This was a movie I had been waiting for years and years to come out, but when it came out, I was disappointed, but it wasn't like a total mess because there was some good stuff in there. It was disappointing, but I wouldn't say that it was like a trash movie. There's some good stuff in this movie, and let's talk about some of that good stuff. The first 20 minutes of this movie has a de-aged Harrison Ford, and what can I say about it? It's incredible. The way that they de-aged his face, and aside from his voice and maybe his face in a couple of scenes, I would say that the de-aging in this movie was just incredible. I thought they did an amazing job with it, and also, I have to give them props because they filmed that entire prologue like an Indiana Jones movie. They filmed it like the original Spielberg way of filmmaking with the spotlights and the way that things are presented with shadows and stuff. The opening of this movie, the prologue, it looks just incredible. It looks incredible because they studied the Spielberg way of filmmaking, and they also decided to have this D.H. Harrison Ford, and it looks just incredible. It honestly gives you chills because it's like you're watching the fourth Indiana Jones movie. It's like you're watching a movie right after Last Crusade. I'm so happy that they brought John Williams back to compose the music for this movie. He puts a little bit of Last Crusade music in the prologue, and it hits all the right notes, to be honest. Like, you just play the classic Indiana Jones music from Last Crusade, and then you also have, like, the Spielberg way of filmmaking with the de-aging. It's amazing. It really is amazing. I think the rest of this movie with Old Indy is decent, but man, is there one thing that almost ruins the movie, and it's Helena Shaw. Helena Shaw is a Mary Sue character, and in case you guys don't know what a Mary Sue is in movies, basically it's a character in movies or TV shows, most of the time it's a girl, who is basically perfect at everything they do and has no flaws, always wins, always one-ups the hero, always one-ups the villain, and never has any flaws or anything that makes them interesting. And Helena Shaw is one of those characters. She's not terribly written. There's some interesting stuff here and there with this character, but yeah, she never loses a fight. She's always one-upping Indy. She gets people hurt and never, like, faces any consequences. It's stuff like that, and it honestly makes Helena such an infuriating character. I honestly feel like Helena's character could have been fixed. Her whole character is very annoying in the movie, but there is some really interesting stuff with her character because the movie shows that she is flawed and there's a lot of things that she likes to hide away, and like her whole motive for going after the Dial of Destiny, that's very interesting because she wants to prove that her father was right and that he wasn't a madman, but they don't focus on those things. They don't focus on the flawed and imperfect, interesting stuff of her character. Instead, they portray her the way she wants to be portrayed in the movie. She wants to be known as a perfect, flawless character, and she's portrayed as a perfect, flawless character. So instead of focusing on the really interesting stuff like the flaws and imperfections, they just focus on the stuff that really makes her annoying. The rest of the movie that has Old Indy, I would say, is decent, but of course Helena takes up a lot of screen time from Indy, or overshadows Indy, or annoys him to the point where he can't really shine. The rest of the characters in this movie can be hit or miss. There's like a new short round replacement who's not terrible, but he's also not too memorable. The villain in this movie was actually kind of cool though, because the villain legitimately looked and felt like an Indiana Jones villain. He just looked like this neo-Nazi scientist, and I will say that the villain of this movie is pretty good. I wish he would have been a little more menacing in the movie, but around the end of the movie, he puts on a Nazi uniform and he's like, I'm the Fuhrer now. And I'm not gonna lie, that was pretty cool. I'm not gonna lie, that was pretty intimidating. I also like the idea of neo-Nazis wanting to collect this artifact that could change the course of history, because who else is Indy gonna fight? He's still gonna be fighting Nazis, so why not let them be neo-Nazis that want to change the course of the war? I think that's a very interesting idea. I know I've been saying that this movie was a disappointment and that I didn't have too much fun with it, but that doesn't mean that I didn't have any fun with it, because this movie, despite it having some problems here and there, I think it's still a very fun movie. I think you're going to have a lot of fun watching it, especially, I already mentioned the prologue, but the prologue just gives you all of the chills that an Indiana Jones movie should. It really does feel like you're watching Indiana Jones 4, or you're watching Indiana Jones right after Last Crusade, you know what I mean? The prologue of this movie is amazing, and there's still a lot of really fun stuff in the rest of this movie. It's awesome to see Harrison Ford back in the fedora. It's great to hear John Williams' music again. It's great to see this character that we've grown to love have one more final adventure, and while the adventure wasn't as good as it should have been, and while it was a little disappointing at times, I still had a lot of fun with this movie. And I don't want to give the impression that it's a trash movie that shouldn't be seen or shouldn't be watched, because it's kind of mid, but it's not trash. It is not a trash movie that's unwatchable. It is the worst Indiana Jones movie in my opinion, but I don't really see it as the worst Indiana Jones film. It should never be seen, don't watch it. I just see this movie as Indiana Jones Part 5, not Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, not Indiana Jones, the worst one. I just see this one as Indiana Jones Part 5, the 5th movie. But what do you guys think of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny? Did you guys enjoy this movie? Have you seen it? I personally think this is the worst Indiana Jones movie, but like I said earlier, I don't think it's so bad that you shouldn't watch it. I just think that it doesn't compare to Crystal Skull or any of the other indie films. I really enjoyed this movie, and I had way too much fun to say that it's not worth watching. I'd recommend it to any indie fans that want to see Indy's last adventure, or they just want to see a little more Indiana Jones action. I know it's been a while since the movie came out, but here's my spoiler review of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. We're going to be talking about spoilers in this video, so if you guys haven't seen the movie, be sure to go check it out. But without further ado, let's get into the spoiler review. Let's talk about one of my least favorite things about the movie, the ending. The ending of this movie is very underwhelming because it's not really a happy ending, and it's not really like a sad ending either. It's really just an ending. It isn't a happy ending by any means, it's just an ending. When you compare the ending of The Last Crusade, which is, in my opinion, the best ending of Indiana Jones, it has him riding off into the sunset, and if you look at the ending of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, it has Indy getting married to Marion, and both of those were really good endings, but here it just has Indy and Marion back together again after like a second divorce, and it just doesn't hit very hard. It really doesn't feel very emotional or impactful because it doesn't give me chills. That scene never gave me chills. It just reminded me of another time that I had chills at the end of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Like I said earlier, this ending is not like a happy ending or anything, it's just unending. It's not a happy ending with Indy riding off into the sunset or getting married to Marion. He and Marion are just kind of there, and it doesn't feel very impactful or emotional. It would feel emotional if it was done better, but because it's just kind of there, I don't know, it just didn't hit as hard, and honestly, it's a very underwhelming ending to Indiana Jones. Shia LaBeouf's character, Mutt Williams, was one of those things that a lot of people, including myself, were really wondering about in this movie because we were wondering if he was going to return for this movie. Was he going to get a cameo? Was he going to make an appearance at all? Or was he going to be mentioned? He's not in this movie, but I will say that I think the way that they wrote him out is very, very good. I feel like the way they wrote him out was clever, and I think it made sense for the character because, in case you guys don't remember, Mutt's stepfather, or at least what he thought was his real father, was a World War II pilot. And with his stepfather being a war hero and him looking up to his stepfather more than his actual father, Indy, I honestly think that he would enlist in the Vietnam War. I honestly never saw Mutt's character as someone that would go on adventures on his own or would follow in Indy's footsteps. I could see him tagging along for some of his adventures, but I never really saw him as someone that would go on adventures on his own or would follow in his footsteps. I also never thought that the connection between Mutt and Indy was that strong. At the end of Crystal Skull, it's definitely a lot better, but I could definitely see struggles and arguments in the future for them. And because I never expected Mutt to follow in Indy's footsteps, and I never expected him and Indy to have the strongest bond, I think it makes total sense that he wanted to enlist in the Vietnam War to really smite Indy and to piss him off. One thing that really doesn't make sense to me, though, is that Indy did not use the dial to change anything. They have this awesome scene where Indy talks about what he would do if he had the dial and he could change the course of history, and he says that he would bring his son back, or he would prevent him from ever going to war. But for some reason, they had this awesome idea for an ending that would have made it a lot better, but of course they did not do that. They didn't mess with the dial, I don't know why. They did not bring Mutt Williams back, they did not change the course of history at all, and that idea of what would Indy do with the dial is just completely thrown out the window. And honestly, I think if they had brought Mutt back, and maybe if Indy had used the dial to change the course of history so that Indy was there for Mutt as a kid, and had actually stayed with Marion, or had fixed up some of the mistakes he made in his past, I think that would have made a much, much better ending. But for some reason, we're stuck with a very mediocre ending. One last thing that I want to talk about when it comes to this movie is the climax, because I am very torn apart when it comes to this third act. The third act has them going back in time to meet Archimedes, and I'm honestly kind of conflicted about this climax because there is a lot of weird stuff in Indiana Jones. We've had aliens, we've had vampires, we've had cybernetic Nazis. I mentioned this in another video. But yeah, there's a lot of weird stuff in the Indiana Jones universe. So is time travel really going too far when we've already seen aliens and a bunch of other crap? I really don't know. On one hand, it's very unrealistic, and on the other hand, it's Indiana Jones, and we've seen aliens and vampires and other stuff like that, so why is it that time travel is too far-fetched? I will say that I think the emotional scene at the end of the third act is very good. I will say that Harrison Ford had a lot of great acting in that scene. He was given some nice material to work with. Unfortunately, though, the emotion coming from Helena in that scene was not warranted. She starts crying and says, Indy, you need to come back to the future and everything. You need to go back to the future. But it just does not work because Helena didn't have a strong connection with Indy. She treats him like crap throughout the whole movie. It did not make sense. The emotion coming from Indy and Harrison Ford was amazing, but the emotion coming from Helena was not warranted. It could have been good if her character was better, but it just wasn't warranted. If she said, like, I need a father figure, I need someone that could help me straighten out my life, and that's why I need you back in the future, that could make sense, but it's just not done well. Blue Beetle, that one kid from Injustice, finally got his own movie, but was it worth the wait? Let's talk about it. Surprisingly, I actually don't have too much to say about this movie because I'm gonna be dead honest with you guys, it's really the most standard, bare-bones superhero story you'll ever see. I'm not trying to say this in like a really negative way because I actually enjoyed this movie a lot, and I had a lot of fun with these characters and this new setting, but I'm not gonna lie, it really rips off its story from Spider-Man. Like, whenever you're doing a story about a teenage superhero, you need to take a little bit of inspiration from Spider-Man because Spider-Man is so impactful when it comes to a teenage superhero. But I'm not gonna lie, they just rip off a lot of things from Spider-Man. Like, there's a character in this movie, and I was like, is that guy gonna be the Uncle Ben? Because he honestly gave me Uncle Ben vibes. And then I was looking at other characters, I'm like, is this the MJ? Is this the Uncle Ben? Is this the Aunt May? Like, I was just watching this movie sometimes, and I was just kind of like, that guy over there, that's Uncle Ben, isn't he? And I mean, I'm not gonna tell you who it was, but like, there were a lot of moments like that where I'm like, there's your Mary Jane, there's the bully, there's, you know what I mean? Like, there was stuff like that in this movie where I just like, yeah, that's, you know what I mean? You gotta rip off a little bit of Spider-Man there. But even though this movie ripped off a little bit of Spider-Man, I don't want it to seem like they ripped off everything because there's new plot points in here, there's new characters in here, there's a new setting, a new hero, and I'm not gonna lie, it's just unique enough and it's just fresh enough to feel fresh and for it to be a new experience. And I'm not sure if this is true, but I heard that this movie is going to be the first movie in the new DC cinematic universe. And I'm not gonna lie, if you're going to make a movie to start off a cinematic universe, you really do have to start out small. You have to start with a simple Spider-Man-like story. You can't just jump to Infinity War. You can't just jump to No Way Home. You can't do something like that. You can't jump to Avengers. You gotta wait. You gotta start off slow. And I'm not gonna lie, if this is the first movie in a new DC cinematic universe, I think as a bare bones, standard superhero movie, I think it's totally fine. I honestly think it is totally fine if you want to start out your DC cinematic universe with a pretty simple superhero story. I'm pretty sure there's going to be some people watching this movie and they're going to be like, oh, this is such a standard movie, it's bare bones, it's bad because of that, but because we've been getting so much multiverse stuff and stuff that just hasn't been working recently, I'm totally fine if you want to go back to where it all started and you want to make another standard superhero movie, just to go back to times when it was simple, you get me? And that's why I think this movie's good. It does the standard superhero story, it does the standard superhero teen story, but I'm not gonna lie, it does it pretty well. While I think Blue Beetle himself could have used a little more development, and I think the villains in this movie were honestly kind of lackluster, I think the rest of this movie's pretty good. It's also pretty funny. I actually laughed a lot in this movie because there's some really good jokes in this movie. There's a family in the movie that is really fun to watch. They're Blue Beetle's family, and they're really fun to watch. They're pretty funny. A lot of good jokes come out of them. And I'm not gonna lie, they're pretty good supporting characters to the point where they kind of overshadow Blue Beetle himself. And like I said earlier, this movie rips off a little bit from Spider-Man, but that's totally fine because there's enough new stuff in it to really be enjoyable. And even though it does the classic Spider-Man story, I think they do it pretty well. I think they do it pretty dang well. Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. This is going to be a pretty interesting one because I'm a massive Ninja Turtles fan, so let's talk about it. Now, there's a lot of stuff in this movie that I liked, and there's also some stuff in this movie that I did not like, so let's talk about the stuff I didn't like too much first. So, the first thing I did not like about this movie was the character designs. Now, I like the turtles in this movie. I think the turtles and the mutants, for the most part, look pretty good. I'm not gonna lie, the turtles in this one, they look great. They always look great, and I like how they incorporate a little bit of pieces of different Ninja Turtles designs, and they kind of mash them up into one design, and I think they did that really well. But even though the designs of the turtles were pretty good, the human and mutant designs in this movie were really hit or miss. The humans in this movie look really, really ugly. Like, even April, who's supposed to look a little better than the rest of the humans in this movie, still looks a little off. Like, there's characters in this movie that are human, and they are really, really funny looking. Like, there's something about the designs of the humans in this movie that just looks really off, in my opinion. And I think that was done on purpose because the message of this movie is the turtles being accepted by humans. But why did you guys have to make the humans so ugly? They really look really ugly in this movie, and I think in some cases that works, but it got really distracting when there was a really ugly human design, and I was just like, what did they do to these guys? Another thing in this movie that I feel like is kind of wasted, but it's also done well, is the casting. You had Giancarlo Esposito as Baxter Stockman, who is the absolute perfect choice to play Baxter Stockman. He's intimidating, and honestly, both in terms of voice and on-screen acting, he'd be perfect as Baxter Stockman. But in this movie, he's only in the movie for like 5 minutes. I was like, yes, Giancarlo Esposito is Baxter Stockman. Perfect casting. I really cannot wait to see that. And then he's in the movie for like 5 minutes, and he's not even like an intimidating Baxter Stockman. He's like this broke old hobo Baxter Stockman. I'm just like, what did they do? You had perfect casting right there to have the most intimidating version of Baxter Stockman ever put to screen, or the most intimidating Baxter Stockman in all of Turtle history, and then you just have him play like the broke old hobo one that like is in the movie for 5 minutes. In my opinion, that was some really wasted casting, and I hope he gets to play Baxter Stockman in another Turtles project because he is really the perfect person to play Baxter Stockman. But man, I feel like he was just put in the wrong movie. Another thing about this movie that I did not like was the Gen Z references, because there's a lot of them in this movie, and honestly, they get old pretty fast. Every time a scene would pop up where I was invested in what was going on, there would be this reference to some influencer, they'd reference COVID or something, and honestly, I just did not care for any of it. Every time it just kind of took me out of the story, and I was like, what are we doing here? Like, why are we referencing a lot of this really, really cringe stuff? And in some way I was fine with these references because the 90s movie, which I still consider to be the best Ninja Turtles movie, it had a lot of references to 90s and 80s culture and stuff like that. So because the 90s movie was a product of its time, it makes sense that this movie is a product of its time. The problem is, a product of the 90s is always going to be better than a product of today. The 90s movie might have become dated after 10 or 20 years, but this movie in the next couple of years is immediately going to become dated because our modern day society and culture when it comes to these things is really, really fast. So tomorrow or next week or next year, a lot of these things that they reference in the movie could just become outdated and forgotten. I also did not like the way that they did the origin story in this movie because there's usually 2 different kinds of origins to Ninja Turtles. One of them being that Hamato Yoshi was a Japanese man who taught the Ninja Turtles once he became Splinter, and in my opinion that's the best Ninja Turtles backstory. But then you have the other one where Splinter was a rat who learned martial arts from another source. Maybe he read it from a book, or maybe he learned it from somewhere else, and sometimes that works, like in the 90s movie. But in this movie, I think it works to some extent, but the other version of the backstory is infinitely better because it always gave the Turtles and Splinter a much closer connection to the martial arts that they were learning. And I think the last thing about this movie that I don't like is its style, because I think it's a pro and a con. You can easily tell that this movie was inspired by Spiderverse, and I love the Spiderverse animation, and I think it works really well here, But then they mix live action footage into the animated world, and in some ways, like in the multiverse in Spider-Verse 2, I think it works, but here I just don't think it works, and it honestly is just a little weird. They play real life YouTube videos in the background, they watch movies, but it's never animated, it's always real life footage, and it just doesn't mesh well. Aside from live action footage being used in this movie, I would say that the rest of the visual design in this movie looks pretty good aside from the humans that I talked about earlier. I will say that the pencil drawn effect is not the same as in Spider-Verse. It is different enough to the point where it is unique, and I'm not gonna lie, it kind of gave me a little bit of a comic feel to it. Spider-Verse felt like it was a comic book come to life, but this one really felt like it was a Ninja Turtles comic come to life. The style of this movie, I gotta give it credit, is unique because it is the Spider-Verse style, but it's not quite the Spider-Verse style. They use a lot of pencil in this, and they use a lot of imagery and stuff like that is pretty well done and honestly gives the movie a really distinct feel. Now let's talk about some of the stuff I actually liked about this movie. One, it's actually well put together. For the most part, I'll say it's well put together. It's not an amazing best Ninja Turtles movie of all time. I think it's just another Ninja Turtles movie because I think the movie's good. It's not amazing because I'm not going to say that it's amazing just because it has a Spider-Verse style or just because it's new. I'm not going to say those things, but it is a good Ninja Turtles film. It is another good Ninja Turtles film, but it's not one of the best Ninja Turtles films. Maybe it's up in the top 3, but that's because we don't have too many amazing ones. I like how this movie tries to take the message from the second Bay film of them being accepted by humans and actually tries to do something with it, unlike the second Bay film. I mentioned this earlier, but the movie takes the Spider-Verse animation, which I love, and it kind of changes it up a bit with a little more pencil-drawn animation to try and make it look like a different kind of comic book. The voice acting in this movie was all around good, and some of the casting in this, like I said, was kind of wasted, but it was still done well. And I did like how the Turtles were actually teens in this movie. Instead of being young adults, they're actually young teens in this movie because usually it says Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but usually they're like 19 years old or 20 years old or 18 years old. By that point, they're basically adults. Here, they're actually 13 or 14 years old. So I actually like that this one is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, not 19-year-old Ninja Turtles. Even though I pointed out a lot of things about this movie that I did not like, this movie's not bad or anything. It's a decent Ninja Turtles film, but I just see it as another Ninja Turtles film because it's not amazing. It doesn't stand out as the best Ninja Turtles movie or it's better than everyone before it. It's another Ninja Turtles film, and it's a decent Ninja Turtles film. I gotta give the movie credit where credit is due because it's not like any other movie I've seen or any other Ninja Turtles movie I've seen. Even though this movie is just decent, at least it's unique enough and it stands out enough as a Ninja Turtles movie, and it's unlike any other Ninja Turtles movie I've ever seen. So I will say that because it stands out from every other Ninja Turtles movie and at least tries to do something with its premise and tries to take it in a new direction, I gotta give them credit for not just repeating what we've already seen. But what do you guys think of Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem? Was it another amazing Ninja Turtles movie? Was it just another Ninja Turtles movie? I'd love to know in the comments. I've always been a fan of the original Santa Claus trilogy because they're very fun and charming films that I love to watch around the holidays. So of course, I was very excited when a Disney Plus series was announced, which would continue the story of the original movies. The Santa Clauses was released to Disney Plus around a year ago, and in my opinion, it's a decent follow-up to the original films. The first season follows Scott as he wants to retire from being Santa Claus after a near-death experience. This requires him to find a replacement for Santa, but unfortunately the person he chose to be his replacement wasn't the best choice. So after his replacement plans on ruining Christmas, it's up to Santa to reclaim the North Pole and save Christmas once again. I feel like the story is very familiar as to something you would see in the original movies, and I feel like there's a lot of new, good ideas in this show. The first season, in my opinion, is pretty good. It continues the story in all the ways that you would want it to. There's a lot of really fun ideas and characters, and it's overall well put together. My only problem with the first season, and I guess the overall show, is that it feels like there's two different writers working on it. One of them knew how to do some pretty good jokes, and the other one knew how to do some really cringe ones. One of my favorite jokes is where Mrs. Claus is questioning the elves as to whether or not there were previous Mrs. Clauses, and for some reason all of the elves act hella secretive as if something terrible had happened in their history. Another one of my favorite jokes comes from Santa himself. This is when he's going to retire as Santa Claus and he says, "Y'all didn't seem to mourn the previous Santa that much, so I'm guessing y'all aren't gonna miss me." I also like how they dive deeper into the lore. They talk about previous Santas, they meet up with St. Nicholas himself, and they also add a lot of other stuff to the lore that you just wouldn't expect. Overall, I would say that Season 1 is a very fun and decent follow-up to the original movies, and in my opinion, it's actually better than the third film. If I had to choose one more problem with the show, I would say it's Noel as a character. Noel is this sort of sidekick elf to Santa, and he's not a terrible character, but his Disney Channel acting with some pretty mediocre writing just doesn't mix well. I can see this character getting on people's nerves, but in my opinion, I don't think he ruins the show or anything. And I think he gets a little bit better in Season 2. Speaking of Season 2 is more or less the same stuff. Plenty of good humor, good ideas, fun characters, and overall another well put together season. This season follows Santa as he tries to continue the family business of being Santa while also having to deal with a new villain, Magnus Antis, who was a forgotten evil Santa from the past. Like I said earlier, this season is just as fun as the first with a lot of fun characters, creative ideas, and overall I definitely think it's good. I don't really want to go deep into these seasons because I don't want to spoil anything, but they are really fun, really decent follow-ups to the original movies, and I definitely don't think you're going to be disappointed with this show. So what do you guys think of the Santa Clauses? Do you like it? Have you seen it? I know a lot of people haven't really seen it. I don't see anybody talking about it. I think I'm one of the only people to actually talk about the second season on YouTube, so I'm not really sure how many people have seen it. But what do you guys think of the Santa Clauses? Be sure to let me know in the comment section below. Thank you all so much for watching. Merry Christmas, guys. God bless, and I'll see you all next time.
Hey, congratulations.